Chapter 562. Great U Sky Palace. There was an ancient air to those words, causing all those who saw them to feel as if the decay of time was crashing into their faces. Su Ming crouched down in a daze for a long time. Great U is incredibly important to all berserkers, because the Great U dynasty was the holy land and core of the berserkers. It was created by the first god of berserkers, and it was the symbol of all berserkers. It was especially so after the continents were split up and the Dead Sea cut off all the continents from one continent to another, causing the people's impression of the Great U dynasty to slowly turn into a legend. Su Ming's understanding of the Great U dynasty only grew deeper after he became a divine general of awakening and a divine general of bone sacrifice as he experienced more things. There might be plenty of rumors saying that Great U is no longer around, but those were just rumors. The appearance of the three great deity statues caused these rumors to not be accepted by the people. In the hearts of many berserkers, the Great U dynasty still existed. It was at the center of the 5 continents and had always protected the berserkers while waiting for the fourth god of berserkers to arrive. Su Ming stared at the broken sign before him with a dumbfounded expression. Violent gusts of wind howled in his head, and he could not calm down even after a long time had passed. When the time it takes for an incense stick to burn passed, he lifted his head with great difficulty and looked at the prideful turtle by his side. Where did you find it? Su Ming asked with a complicated expression. The turtle swung its head and became even more prideful. Take me there, Su Ming said calmly. The turtle hesitated for a moment before it laid down slowly. Without any hesitation, Su Ming went onto the turtle's back. Once he stood there, the turtle lifted its head and let out a low growl before it charged into the distance. It was dark all around him, and he could not see too far into the distance. Seawater filled the area, and the pressure was something Su Ming could not withstand in the past, but he could now. He had been in this frozen world for many years, and besides the time he retrieved the spike club, he had not ventured out to explore the area. He did not even spread his divine sense too far. It was not that he did not want to, but the world was rejecting his divine sense, making it difficult for him to spread it out. Besides, Su Ming spent most of his time training and had the turtle outside, which was why he did not search for where he was. In his heart, he had a vague idea that this should be the Dead Sea, but he did not know where the surface of the sea above him was. At that moment, as the turtle moved forward, Su Ming left the cave abode he had stayed in for 4 years and swam into the distance. His divine sense slowly spread out. Although it couldn't spread very far, under his perseverance, he was able to cover a bit. As the tortoise sped along, he saw the location of his immortal's cave behind him. Shockingly, it was a mountain. His cave was located at the top of the mountain. Further into the distance, Su Ming saw a gigantic palace. That palace was completely sealed in ice, and only a corner of it could be seen. As the turtle continued moving forward, Su Ming's heart trembled. Gradually, he saw palaces after palaces. He saw people dressed in strange clothes within the ice. There were also gigantic ferocious beasts, ferocious giant snakes, and an innumerable amount of people fighting against each other. At that moment, all of these people had turned into a part of the ice, and they looked as if they were alive. In fact, as the turtle continued charging forward, Su Ming saw an old man with a head full of white hair above him. He wore a purple robe and looked incredibly mighty. As he lifted his right hand, a round plate floated in the air, and under his feet was an incredibly large dark turtle. However, it had also turned into an ice statue and was connected to the ice pillars on the ground. Standing before him was a middle-aged man dressed in an emperor's robe. There was a totem on that man's face, a picture of a berserker mark. There was grief on his face, and he held a huge sail in his right hand. He looked as if he was about to swing it, but he had already turned into an ice statue and became a part of the frozen land. Between them were snowflakes that had been sealed in ice. As they were sealed in ice, it was currently snowing and a desolate wind was currently swirling about. Su Ming could already imagine that one day a desolate wind would moan as it blew through the world. Snow would dance in the wind, and the sky would be split into pieces before the snow would fall on the ground, layer by layer. Su Ming saw this scene with his divine sense, and it made his heart tremble. As the turtle continued charging forward, he gradually saw more of the palaces and towers that covered the ground. He could not see the end of the palaces and towers, and there were also houses all over the place. Each of those houses looked incredibly ancient. In fact, he could even see people who were still fighting against each other outside those houses. They were fighting madly against people dressed in strange clothes. Su Ming was not unfamiliar with those strange clothes. He had seen them on the Celestial Maiden, on the Immortals in the land of the shamans, and on Di Tian. This was a city, or perhaps more accurately speaking, Great Yu Imperial City. Su Ming mumbled. On the turtle's back, he saw a towering palace. It was the biggest palace among all the palaces in the land, but it was broken. In fact, even the spot where the sign was supposed to be had crumbled. They continued moving into the distance. The turtle was clearly used to all of this. As it swam forward, it brought Su Ming to the frozen city that was buried under the Dead Sea. When they arrived at the center of the frozen city, Su Ming saw a mountain. More accurately speaking, it was an altar. It was in the shape of a heptagon and was entirely black. It stood tall and unmoving in the ice. He saw more than 100,000 people standing under the altar, as if they were worshipping it. At the top of the altar, Su Ming saw an old man sitting cross-legged. That old man was dressed in a purple robe, and he was sealed in ice along with the altar. Su Ming looked at this scene in a daze. The turtle beneath him let out a cheering roar as it charged forward and brought Su Ming to the top of the altar. At the instant Su Ming lowered his head, he saw the old man in purple robes sealed in ice on the altar beneath him. That old man's face was covered in wrinkles and brown spots. His eyes were open, but not a hint of light could be seen within them. Before him was a complete spine, and in his right hand was a stone slip that stopped on the 13th spine. The old man lifted his head as if he was looking at the sky, but when Su Ming looked towards him, a loud bang went off in his head, and he had a feeling that the old man on the altar was looking at him. That gaze seemed to have come from the passage of time. No one knew how long it had existed, but it was as if the old man had indeed seen something before he died. Perhaps what he saw was what was happening right then. It was an indescribable feeling. As Su Ming's mind trembled, he felt that the entire frozen world was filled with an indescribable strangeness. At that moment, a low roar suddenly traveled forth from the frozen city. That roar seemed to have come from under the endless layers of ice, causing the ice to tremble and reverberate in the air. It seemed to have come from a great distance, but when it traveled out, it made the turtle beneath Su Ming let out a shrill scream of pain and leave swiftly. Su Ming's heart trembled, and his vision became clouded. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his cultivation base was almost about to crumble. It was just a roar, and it had traveled through the endless layers of ice, but it already contained such shocking power. Su Ming's pupils shrank. The turtle beneath him also increased its speed in the midst of its fear, and in the blink of an eye, it was already charging into the distance. As the turtle charged into the distance, the altar gradually became indistinct, and the roar slowly faded away. Su Ming wiped off the blood at the corners of his mouth. As fear lingered in his heart, he saw immortals on the frozen land further in the distance. There was no end to them. Su Ming could sense that there were hundreds of thousands of them. There were countless more behind them, and it was difficult to calculate just how many there were. Su Ming remained silent and simply allowed the turtle to bring him around in all directions. Eventually, they left the frozen city, and when they arrived at a plain at the bottom of the sea, the turtle stopped and let out a few low growls. Su Ming lowered his head and looked down. There were broken palace wreckages all over the plain, and there were even a few of them floating upwards. Similarly, as the turtle brought Su Ming around in a huge circle, he also saw wreckages similar to this one sinking down from above. Clearly, due to a violent tremor or an accident, the wreckages in this place had loosened up, causing the broken pieces to rise and fall. Some of them floated to the surface of the sea before sinking down again. Su Ming could already guess that this drastic change was due to the clash between eastern wastelands and south morning, which had caused the entire Dead Sea to tremble. With a hint of melancholy and an indescribable depression, the turtle carried Su Ming on its back and swam towards his cave abode. Due to being afraid of the low growls, the turtle swam in a large circle this time. Su Ming stood on the turtle's back and saw the altar in the distance once again, along with the old man in purple robes standing on it. What was he looking at when the immortals launched a large-scale attack on us? Su Ming stared at the old man on the altar. After a long, long time, when the turtle left, he could no longer see anything. The turtle brought Su Ming back to the mountain, where his cave abode was located. Su Ming walked down the turtle's back and stood beside the ice mountain. His heart could not calm down even after a long time had passed. He looked at the place with a complicated expression, and after some time, he closed his eyes. When he opened them once again, calmness had returned to his eyes. Su Ming patted the turtle's gigantic head and asked softly, "Do you want to come with me?" The turtle hesitated, then shook its head. Su Ming looked at the turtle and no longer tried to persuade it. He turned around and walked towards the ice mountain with a resolute look on his face. He knew that this was not a place where he could delve deeper into his current self. Just what was the reason that caused this place to be sealed in ice? Just what was the reason that caused this place to be buried in the depths of the Dead Sea? Su Ming believed that one day he would be able to completely understand all of this. However, even though his level of cultivation was strong, it was still not enough. The mysteriousness of this place, the strangeness of this place, as well as the fact that the turtle beast had subconsciously avoided certain places as it moved around. All of these signs clearly showed that this place was definitely not as deathly silent as it appeared to be. The roar that had shocked Su Ming had also added another layer of mystery to this place. With this determination, Su Ming walked into the ice mountain and into the relocation gate. He turned his head back and cast a final glance at the frozen world and the words on the plate outside the ice mountain. "Great You Sky Palace," Su Ming mumbled. As the relocation gate shone, he disappeared into it. When the turtle saw Su Ming disappear, it let out a few reluctant roars, then lay down on the ground and continued waiting. Once you finish reading this chapter, I strongly suggest you read the preface again. Once you finish reading the preface, I strongly suggest you cast a monthly vote. If you don't have a monthly vote, I strongly suggest you cast a recommendation vote. If you don't have a recommendation vote, I strongly suggest you come to Chidian website and register an account. Highly recommended. To be continued. If you like this work, I welcome you to come to Chidian website and cast a recommendation vote or a monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 563. Today's 3 chapters are more than 9,000. Tomorrow, I will strive for 12,000. It's not that I'm not doing well today. It's just that today is special. Today is the headquarters' birthday. Everyone knows this, but what everyone doesn't know is that today is also the birthday of a relative of mine. Every year, the day before the Mid-Autumn Festival is his birthday. He always thought that I don't remember, and I didn't tell him in advance, but I will never forget. 2 years ago, when he was raising flowers and looking at me with a face full of pride. 10 years ago, when he was at the peak of his career, he was laid off, lost overnight, and had to start all over again. 20 years ago, when he was angry, I trembled. When he lifted my slippers, I felt dizzy. When he picked up his belt, I trembled. His fiery eyes could see the wuxia novels hidden behind my books. In the middle of the night, he lifted my quilt and took away my flashlight that I was reading. 30 years ago, he was high-spirited and full of drive. He married the city's beauty that accompanied him his whole life. At that time, he didn't know that it was such a correct choice. Who he is, everyone should know. Today's 3 chapters will explode, tomorrow's explode. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 564. The sky filled with rain would never be clear again. A layer of dark clouds hung heavily over the endless sea, causing all those who saw it to feel oppressed. The normal people might have already died, and even if they were lucky enough to survive the disaster, they would never be able to see the clear blue sky again. All they could see was a layer of darkness. If anyone wanted to see the clear blue sky, then they would have to possess a certain level of cultivation and be able to fly through the layers of clouds. Only then would they be able to see the sky that was covered by the clouds. However, while flying under the clouds was easy, moving through the layers of clouds that were filled with the power of lightning and filled with the power to tear them apart was definitely not an easy task. Not only did it place an incredibly high requirement on the physical body, those who had not reached the Berserker Soul realm would also find it difficult to withstand the rumbling thunder in the clouds for too long. The thick layer of clouds covered the land of the shamans in the past, and it also covered the land of Berserkers. Besides the seawater, there was no end to the land. Only a large dark shadow could be seen vaguely in the east under the curtain of rain. It looked like the eastern wastelands, and further into the distance was empty. It was as if the land of South Morning no longer existed. At that moment, under the tumbling, dark clouds and the dark sky and the curtain of rain, there were 3 figures charging forward. They turned into 3 long arcs that charged through the sky and earth. The 3 of them had panicked expressions on their faces. At that moment, they were fleeing into the distance at full speed. There were 2 men and 1 woman among them. They were dressed in normal clothes, and there was nothing too outstanding about their appearances. Only their levels of cultivation were above average. The strongest man looked like he was halfway to becoming a ladder shaman, and the other man was around the later stage of the medial shaman realm. However, strangely, the woman among the 3 was a berserker, and she did not bother to hide it. The ripples of power coming from her body in the bone sacrifice realm were very clear, and by the looks of it, she was most likely in the later stage of the bone sacrifice realm. With their power, even if they ran into a normal, powerful berserker who had just become a ladder shaman, they could still put up a fight, albeit with great difficulty. They might not be able to win, but if they worked together, one of them could still escape. But at this moment, the 3 of them were moving at an incredible speed. They whistled across the sea, and from their expressions of shock and their extreme speed, it was obvious that they were fleeing for their lives. Behind the 3 of them, there were 2 rays of light chasing after them. It was an old man and a young man. The old man's expression was indifferent, and he did not move at all. His feet were in the air, and the young man behind him had a proud expression as he looked at the 3 people fleeing in the distance with disdain. "Master, are these 3 fools? They clearly know that it's impossible for them to survive. So why are they still running for their lives? If it were me, I would simply fight to the death." The young man glanced at the old man beside him and asked, "Because I gave them hope," the old man said faintly. His expression was calm, as if there were too many things in the world that could not affect him. With Master's power, killing these 3 people is as easy as flipping over your palm. The young man frowned. "These 3 people are just bait. It would have been fine if I didn't come out, but since I brought you out to hunt, then we might as well hunt more. As they flee, they will continue calling for help and will attract more people from the land of South Morning. By doing so, we can also gather enough war points for you to enter Scour Civ Palace during the Scour Civ Festival." The old man remained indifferent, as if he had everything in his control. "So, this is fishing?" A cruel smile appeared on the young man's face. As he looked at the 3 people fleeing before him, his smile grew wider. "Scour Civ Festival." An expectant look appeared on the young man's face. It was as if those words held a great attraction for him. "Before the Scour Civ Festival half a year later, a large number of our people will come to the barren swamp of South Morning to collect the spirit in this place. That's why we have to stagger the time and come earlier." As the master and disciple spoke, the surface of the sea beneath the 3 people fleeing before them suddenly exploded. As the seawater splashed everywhere, for people charged up, those 4 people were incredibly quick, and when they charged into the sky, they turned into 4 people. These 4 people were all middle-aged. 3 of them were berserkers, and 1 of them was a shaman. The instant these 4 people appeared, All of their power erupted from their bodies. Almost at the instant they appeared, the three people fleeing before them also froze for an instant before they tumbled backwards without any hesitation and charged towards the old and young man with the other four people. You're just medial shamans in the bone sacrifice realm, and you dare ambush me? The old man said flatly. At the same time disdain appeared in his eyes, he lifted his right hand and pushed down on the sea beneath him. With that one push, the seawater roared and stirred up huge waves. Those waves surged into the sky and instantly enveloped the entire area. As booming sounds and screams of pain reverberated in the air, the moment the waves disappeared, 5 of the 7 people exploded and turned into flesh and blood that spilled into the sea. The other 2, a man and a woman, coughed out blood and retreated swiftly with grief on their faces, once again fleeing at full speed. The old man stood where he was and shook his head. The people of South Morning are so weak that they can't even withstand a single blow. Let's go. Kill another 300 of them, and you'll have enough war points, the old man said flatly, and continued chasing after the 2 people before him. The young man looked at his master with a face full of worship and hurriedly followed behind. In the depths of the Dead Sea, some distance away from this place, in the darkness, a powerful ray of light suddenly appeared and disappeared. The place where the light disappeared came from at the bottom of the sea. It came from a door that gave off a feeling of decay. That door was about to crumble. Once the light disappeared, a person appeared. That person was Su Ming. Su Ming was submerged at the bottom of the Dead Sea. He turned his head around and cast a glance at the door. After some time, he charged towards the surface of the sea above him. There was not much light in the Dead Sea. There were plenty of ferocious creatures in it, but the instant Su Ming flew out, a hint of purple light spread out from his body, causing all the ferocious creatures around him to shudder and swiftly avoid him. It was as if Su Ming had turned into an incredibly terrifying existence to them at that moment. Su Ming charged through the Dead Sea quietly, and he was so quick that a vortex appeared at the bottom of the sea. That vortex rumbled, and even the surface of the sea started rotating slowly. After a moment, the surface of the sea exploded, and as booming sounds reverberated in the air, Su Ming rushed out from the bottom of the sea. Seawater surged up and fused with the curtain of rain in the sky before it scattered on the ground once again. Su Ming stood on the surface of the sea and looked at his surroundings. There was an endless expanse of emptiness around him, causing him to remain silent for a long time. South Morning should no longer exist. Su Ming's gaze fell on the south. That was where the land of berserkers was located, and that was also where the 9th summit was located. As Su Ming looked around, a deep sense of longing appeared in his eyes. He missed the 9th summit, missed his master, missed his eldest senior brother, second senior brother, and Huzi. 20 years. Su Ming mumbled. It had been 20 years since he left the 9th summit. At this moment, he, who had just returned from the frozen world, had an incredibly strong desire to go to the land of berserkers, to the 9th summit, and to see everything that had happened in the past. In the midst of his thoughts, Su Ming turned into a long arc and charged through the world, charging towards the direction of the land of berserkers. He did not bother hiding his power. His presence that surged into the sky, his astonishing speed, and the chilling aura that had existed within his body for several years caused all those who noticed him to feel their hearts tremble as he flew. Even those who had reached the Berserker Soul realm or Ladder Shaman realm would feel a mighty pressure if they sensed the presence coming from Su Ming's body at that moment, and that feeling could turn their hearts into palpitations. Su Ming charged forward without stopping. His gaze fell on the surface of the sea beneath him, and he saw the islands floating on the surface of the sea. The land of South Morning was torn to pieces during the crash. It either collapsed and sank to the bottom of the sea, or turned into numerous islands. The terrain of the entire land of South Morning has been completely changed. Su Ming shook his head. With a flash, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already far away, heading towards the land of berserkers in the past. Just as he was about to continue moving forward, he suddenly came to a halt and turned his head to cast a glance at the surface of the sea in the distance. That's... Su Ming was momentarily stunned, and he changed his direction. There was an island on the Dead Sea. That island looked incredibly small and was filled with mountain rocks. There was not a single hint of vegetation on it, and it looked completely bare. There were originally no islands here. In fact, there were no islands in the area around the land of South Morning in the past. However, after the disaster, islands gradually appeared. There were less than 20 people living on the island. There was a faint layer of light enveloping the island, forming a simple defense. These dozen-something people built a few simple cave abodes on the island and lived there. Their cave abodes were located in a valley, and there was a statue on the cliff above the valley. That statue had been roughly carved out by someone, and it could be vaguely seen that it was a man with long hair. The man had his head lifted and was looking into the distance. He held a huge bow in his right hand, but his face was indistinct and could not be seen clearly. Two old men were sitting cross-legged on the mountain rocks right under the man's statue. These two people were dressed in rags, and their faces were ancient. They had their eyes closed as they meditated. Wisps of smoke spread out from the cave abodes in the valley. That was the people in the tribe preparing food. To this small tribe of nearly 20 people, ever since they gathered on the island, their lives had been passing by like this. Before long, the people walked out of the cave abodes. There were men and women, young and old among them. Once they arrived at the top of the valley, they knelt down before the statue and worshipped it in low whispers. We fated kin were born in barren sky. We originally did not have a future because we had to create a future. We will worship respected Senior MO until we no longer exist. Respected Senior MO is the sky, and we are the spirits. Our words of worship will never change for generations to come. We will gather at the foot of Sky River Mountain. All fated kin must remember this. Search for Sky River Mountain. They worship the statue every single day. Rain or shine did not stop them during the past few years, and nothing could interrupt their devout ritual. It's the last day of the month. Everyone, check your monthly tickets. Don't waste them. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 565. Su Ming appeared in midair above the island. He looked at the people on the island. Their faces were rather familiar to him. These people were the fated kin from the world of Nine. When Su Ming saw them, a smile appeared on his face. He moved, and as if the screen of light did not exist, he moved through it and entered the island. His arrival did not attract any attention from the people worshipping the statue in the valley. Su Ming stood on a mountain rock on the island and looked at the statue worshipped by the people in the valley not too far away. Although the statue was blurry, he could still recognize that it was him. Fated kin, in the depths of Su Ming's heart, this race that was born in the world of Nine once again formed a deep impression in his heart. It was not that bad when he was in the world of Nine. After all, at that time, Su Ming was incredibly important to them. However, in truth, Su Ming did not care whether they would keep to the promise they made all those years ago after they came out. However, when he saw these dozen-something fated kin still keeping to the promise and worshiping him, not only did his impression of this race deepen, he also had a slightly different feeling towards them. The words of worship, the words respected Senior MO, and the fact that they did not forget to gather together in Sky River Mountain made Su Ming sigh with emotion. His gaze gathered on his statue, and just as he was about to walk out, he suddenly frowned and leaped past the fated kin who were still worshipping him to look at the sky in the distance. At this moment, in the sky hundreds of kilometers away from this small island, the man and the woman who were being chased by the old man from the eastern wasteland looked sad. They could not see the hatred between them because they were born in the witch and barbarian tribes. Yamu, what should we do? The remains of the barren island is right in front of us. The female berserker bit her bottom lip. Her face was pale, and there was even blood trickling down the corners of her mouth. Sir Zhongzhe and Sir Yunlai are still in isolation, or else there's no way they would let this eastern wasteland berserker in the Berserker Soul Realm act so arrogantly here. If this person had dared to come before the catastrophe, he would have died without a doubt. The man called Yamu had grief on his face. This person was the young man Su Ming had gotten to know in Autumn Sea Tribe all those years ago. Yamu. However, he was now middle-aged, and there were some white hairs on both sides of his temples. The people of the Eastern Wastelands have always been arrogant and conceited. This person has been chasing us all the way, but he hasn't killed all of us. He must be trying to lure out the other people from our two races. We can't go back to our island. We can't let the people of the Eastern Barren Territory know where we are. In front of us is the Relic Barren Island. Let's go there. Yamu looked determined. But there are also some people who call themselves fated kin living on the Barren Island in the remains of the Barren Island. I can't be bothered anymore. Yamu's body swayed and he changed his direction, heading straight for the Relic Barren Island in his memory. Under the premise that the old man and the young man didn't want to chase too much, Yamu and the woman quickly approached the remains Swamp Barren Island after the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Slowly, a barren island appeared before their eyes. As the two of them swiftly closed in and flew into midair above the small island, they saw the 20 or so fated kin in the screen of light below them worshipping the statue. They were not unfamiliar with that statue. In truth, they had come here 2 years ago in an attempt to persuade the shamans in this place to go to Southern Swamp Island with them. That was one of the biggest islands in the area after the calamity. However, these people's indifference towards them caused their attempt to persuade them to go to failure. To Yamu, these shamans were all incredibly strange. They called themselves fated kin, and they worshipped some respected senior MO. That respected senior MO was the person carved on the statue. What made Yamu even stranger was that the person in the statue looked rather familiar to him. But due to the roughness of the statue and its indistinct appearance, he could not identify the source of that sense of familiarity. Almost the moment Yamu and the woman arrived on the barren island, the two of them did not notice Su Ming standing on a mountain rock on the island and looking at them. Yamu. Su Ming thought that the man on the screen of light was slightly familiar. Once he thought about it carefully, he recognized that person. Similarly, he had also noticed the old man chasing after him behind Yamu, who had a terrified look on his face. A berserker in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm. Su Ming decided that he might as well not walk out. Instead, he sat down cross-legged on a mountain rock and started watching calmly. My friend from the land of South Morning, fated kin. I am Yamu, a former member of Autumn Sea Tribe. Right now, I'm a third-grade guard of Southern Swamp Island. I came here 2 years ago. Yamu forced down the panic in his heart outside the screen of light and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow towards the dozen-something people on the valley. The woman from the Berserker tribe beside him also wrapped her fist in her palm. Right now, there are powerful enemies chasing after us. My friends from the fated kin, please open the screen of light and let us seek refuge once again. When Yamu said these words, he also felt that he had gone a little overboard. This was the same as luring his enemies to this place, but he had no other choice. He could either die or borrow the help of the fated kin. Then perhaps he would have a chance of survival. As for returning to Southern Swamp Island, he did not even think about it. He knew that the people from Eastern Wastelands had been searching for the islands where the survivors of the calamity resided. Every single time they found one, a bloody massacre would ensue. Southern Swamp Island was one of the big islands in this region. The powerful shamans and berserkers had cast an art to cover it up, which was why it could be preserved. No one would be able to know the location of the island. In fact, there was a seal placed on all the people who left the island. If anyone tried to forcefully search through their memories, then those memories would instantly crumble. The people chasing after us are from Eastern Wastelands. They are the mortal enemies of the land of South Morning. All those who run into us from the land of South Morning will kill them and take their souls. We were forced into a corner. My friends from the fated kin, please help us. Even if we leave now, this island will be exposed. As Yamu spoke in anguish, the people on the valley behind the screen of light lifted their heads and looked at the two of them coldly. There was no fear or dread on the fated kin's faces. Compared to the things they had gone through in their lives, What was happening before their eyes was insignificant. After all, their enemies were still humans and not the sacred bats, drifting roamers, or spirits of Nine. An old man walked out from among the dozen something fated kin. His gaze was like lightning, and his level of cultivation was the same as Yamu's. He was also a medial shaman who had reached the peak of the peak, and he was already half a step away from becoming a ladder shaman. He first cast an aloof glance at Yamu and the woman, then with a wave of his arm, a crack immediately appeared on the screen of light beneath Yamu. Yamu and the woman did not hesitate. They quickly crawled into the crack and stepped onto the island. When the screen of light closed up once again, an old man could be seen in the sky in the distance. Behind him was a boy, and they were walking slowly through the air towards them. Once Yamu arrived on the valley, he swept his gaze past the fated kin around him. All of them had incredibly aloof expressions on their faces, and when they looked at the two of them, it was as if they were looking at air. This sort of gaze made the woman beside Yamu instinctively take a few steps back. Yamu did not have a lot of understanding towards the fated kin, but he was slightly more knowledgeable than the woman. He knew that every single member of this strange race was a shaman. They worshipped respected senior Mo and did not want to come into contact with the outside world. They kept themselves to themselves. Aside from that, he knew nothing else. In the face of the fated kin's aloof gazes, Yamu immediately took a step forward and wrapped his fist in his palm before bowing deeply towards the gigantic statue before him. I am Yamu of Southern Swamp Island. Greetings, respected Senior Mo's statue. May the respected Senior Mo live for many generations to come, and may the gods never cease to exist. The woman beside Yamu also immediately took a few steps forward and bowed to him as well. When they saw the two of them doing this, the expressions of the fated kin gradually became gentler, but they were still as cold as ever. Respected Senior Mo is not a god, but a god of our race who is even stronger than gods. There will only be benefits to you if you worship him. There will be no harm in it. The old man who had spoken just now said languidly at that moment. Yamu did not agree with those words in his heart, but his expression was solemn. Just as he was about to speak, he saw the old fated kin lift his right hand. Immediately, light shone in his hand, and a black bow manifested in the span of a breath. At that moment, a middle-aged man walked out from among the fated kin beside him. Thumping sounds came from his body, and, as he lifted his right hand, a similarly large bow appeared in his hand. Soon after, Yamu and the man, who had never seen fated kin attack before, immediately saw 4 people walk out from among the dozen-something people. Their presences spread out, and they found that all of them were soul catchers. They were medial soul catchers, and they had even reached the later stage of the medial shaman realm. They might not have attained great completion, but soul catchers were powerful to begin with, and they were rare. While Yamu was stunned, another 4 people walked out from among the dozen-something people and stood beside the old man and the middle-aged man with the large bow. Their presences spread out, and he found out that they were spirit mediums. There are 3 teenagers among the 19 people, and among the remaining 16, there are 4 soul catchers for spirit mediums and 2 battle shamans. Yamu sucked in a sharp breath. Even before the disaster, only middle-sized tribes could bring out such a group, and all of them were medial shamans. Yet before he could finish sucking in that breath, he immediately widened his eyes, because he saw another 4 people walk out from among the remaining people. These 4 people closed their eyes before the crowd, lifted their hands, and the power of thought soothsayers spread out swiftly. Thought soothsayers. Yamu instinctively took a step back, unable to believe what he was seeing. 4 thought soothsayers, 4 soul catchers, 4 spirit mediums, 2 battle shamans. I can't believe that there are actually powerful berserkers among the 19 people. Yamu knew just how powerful thought soothsayers were. When he saw that the 4 thought soothsayers were all medial shamans in the later stage, he could not help but be stunned. What caused him to be in even greater disbelief was that these people were still as aloof as ever, and there was also a thick, murderous aura around them. That murderous aura was definitely not something that could be born overnight. It was something that could only appear after a long period of continuous slaughter and madness in a unique environment. It was especially so when Yamu saw the same thick, murderous aura around the three children. Suddenly, a deep sense of wariness rose within him towards the mysterious fated kin who had suddenly appeared over the past few years. Just where did they come from? Happy Mid-Autumn, today is the day our families are reunited. I hope that all of you will be happy for the rest of your lives. To be continued. If you like this work, please come at Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 566. Su-Ming looked at the fated kin in the distance, and a smile appeared on his face. They had gone through 15 years of life and death trials in the world of Nine, and those who managed to survive were definitely the cream of the crop. These people might not have become ladder shamans, but their unique experiences had caused their murderous aura and determination to surpass that of other people. They could rise to the sky and face all-powerful existences to fight for their own fates. Because they were fated kin, because their fates were in their own hands. They would not ask for others to save them. They would save themselves. Because they wanted all the people in the world to see with their own eyes how the fated kin, who were born in the world of Nine, would control their own future after they were abandoned and lost it. They were aloof because the world had abandoned them, which was why they were aloof to the world. They would only give their warmth to their own people, and they would only spill their blood in the battle to protect their own fates. As time passed by and the years passed by, when these fated kin took that step forward and became ladder shamans, they would stir up an indescribable storm on the land and the world. This storm came from their determination, from their desire to control their own fates after they were abandoned. Su-Ming looked at them, and he saw himself vaguely. He gave up on the idea of helping them. He wanted to see to what extent the fated kin could bring out their power. This was a battle between fated kin, and it was not yet time for him to attack. Besides, with him around, he would not let his fated kin's lives be in danger. 4 thought soothsayers, 4 soul catchers, 4 spirit mediums, and 2 battle shamans. These 14 people stood there, and the murderous aura spreading out from their bodies surged into the sky, causing the incoming old man to come to an abrupt halt in his footsteps. A grave look appeared on his face as he stared at the small island several thousands of feet away, at the dozen-something people who were looking at him from the valley on the island. I didn't expect that there would be such powerful souls in the land of South Morning after the disaster. One of their souls is equivalent to dozens of other souls. The old man mumbled, and as a glint appeared in his eyes, he took a step towards the island. The moment his foot landed, the old man waved his right sleeve. Immediately, the seawater below him roared and surrounded the entire island. It turned into huge waves that seemed to want to drown the entire island. At the same time, as the old man swung his arm, a Dead Sea giant that was 1,000 feet tall appeared in the Dead Sea. That Dead Sea giant looked as if it had been enslaved by the old man. As it roared, its eyes were lifeless. Once it leaped up, it charged towards the island. Yamu's heart skipped a beat. He had seen this Dead Sea giant before. It was this ferocious beast of the sea that had killed more than half of the people he led. Just as he was about to warn the fated kin, he saw the 4 thought soothsayers close their eyes. A wave of power that belonged to the thought soothsayers swiftly surrounded the area and turned into wisps of aura that could not be seen with the naked eye that charged towards the 2 battle shamans. It was also at that moment that the 2 fated kin battle shamans lifted the bows in their hands. At the instant they drew the bowstrings, a dark light appeared in the eyes of the 4 soul catchers. The clouds in the sky tumbled even further, and the falling rain seemed to have gathered in midair. Immediately after, the 4 spirit mediums spread their arms wide. As their murmurs echoed in the air, wisps of souls of the dead charged towards them from the Dead Sea around them and the island, charging straight towards the battle shaman longbow. With a hum, the middle-aged battle shaman was the first to let go of the bow in his hand. A dark ray of light shot out of the screen of light on the island like an arrow and charged towards the Dead Sea Giant. It was so quick that it instantly tore through space, causing a series of cracks to appear in the air. There was also an indescribable madness and murderous aura contained within it, causing some of the clouds in the sky to tumble backwards. In an instant, it crashed into the roaring Dead Sea Giant that was charging towards them. The power to tear through space. Yamu was dumbfounded by the sight and cried out in surprise. The breathing of the female berserker beside him quickened, and her face was filled with disbelief. Booming sounds instantly reverberated in the air and spread in all directions. The Dead Sea Giant let out a pained scream, and with a bang, most of its body was blasted apart by the arrow. It fell towards the surface of the sea with a bang. "What is this arrow?" The same words tumbled out of Yamu, the female berserker, and the old Eastern Wastelander's mouths almost at the same time. Yamu was completely stunned. He could not imagine that the previously inconspicuous fated kin on this lone island would possess such a powerful force. The old Eastern Wastelander was also shocked. After all, the Dead Sea Giant was equivalent to a berserker in the initial stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, but that arrow had shattered it. It might not have died, but this power was still enough to make him incredibly shocked. This is the fated kin's arrow created after we fought against the sacred bats and drifting roamers for 15 years, and countless of our people died. Suming whispered softly, "We fated kin will not fight against the outside world. It doesn't matter whether it's South Morning or Eastern Wastelander. This place belongs to us fated kin, and we shall not trespass." The one who spoke was the old man who had never let go of the bow in his hand. He looked at the old Eastern Wastelander in the sky and spoke in a low voice. "Fated kin." The old Eastern Wastelander's pupil shrank. This was the first time he heard of this name. The boy behind him had a pale face at that moment. The arrow just now had already shocked him to the core. Thank goodness, there are only a dozen something fated kin. If there were hundreds of them, then they would be an incredibly terrifying force. The old Eastern Wastelander sucked in a deep breath. He could already imagine that if there were nearly 100 arrows like the one just now, then the destructive force would be equivalent to a full-powered strike from a berserker in the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. The old man stared at the person with the bow on the island, and a glint appeared in his eyes. With a cold sneer, he took a step forward and closed in on the island in an instant. The power of this arrow might be strong, but I'd like to see just what other mysteries you fated kin have besides this. As he spoke, he closed in on the island and lifted his right hand swiftly. Immediately, booming sounds reverberated in the sky before him, and a mountain and river manifested. In an incredibly real manner, it descended swiftly towards the island. The old fated kin with the bow narrowed his eyes and let go of the arrow without any hesitation. Buzzing sounds reverberated in the air once again, and as the world rumbled, the dark light moved. It ignored the illusion of the mountain and river and charged straight towards the old Eastern Wastelander. It closed in on the island in an instant, and the old Eastern Wastelander's pupil shrank. As he lifted his right hand, a powerful light suddenly erupted from the ring on his finger. That light instantly illuminated the entire area, causing no one to be able to see what was inside. That light only lasted for an instant before it disappeared. The arrow of dark light disappeared, and the old man took 3 steps back with a slightly pale face. What a powerful arrow! If you had become a ladder shaman, that arrow would have injured me badly, but now, killing intent shone in the old man's eyes. He lifted his right hand, and the illusion of the mountain and river crashed into the screen of light on the island with a bang. The screen of light shattered and turned into an endless amount of shards that tumbled backwards, causing the island to instantly lose all form of protection. Yamu's face turned pale, and it was the same for the woman beside him. Despair appeared in their eyes. To them, the fated kin might be strong, but there was a limit to their strength. They still could not fight against the old Eastern Wastelander in the middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. Yet soon, the two of them noticed that not a single hint of change could be detected on the fated kin's faces. They were still as aloof as ever, and the old man who had let go of the bough lifted his right foot and stomped on the ground. With that one stomp, the entire island started trembling. The instant the illusion of the mountain and river broke through the screen of light and charged downwards with loud booming sounds, the spirit mediums and soul catchers knelt down and worshipped Su Ming's statue. A thick wave of aura of death swiftly gathered up in the valley and erupted into the sky with a bang. Aura of death impact, the old fated kin said languidly. The place where the fated kin lived was definitely a place with a thick aura of death. This was a tradition that they had never lost during the 15 years they had been fighting and fighting against each other in the world of Nine. That was why they chose this island. It was precisely because they had noticed that there was an aura of death under this island. It might not be as strong as the aura in the valley in the world of Nine, but they could still release a little of it and bring out the power of two strikes. This modification was a unique method unique to the fated kin, and it was something they had come up with through trial and error in the face of death. The aura of death rushed out with a bang and charged towards the illusion of the mountain and river pressing down on them. The instant they crashed into each other, booming sounds reverberated violently in the area. The mountain and river crumbled, and the aura of death disappeared, leaving behind only the old eastern wastelander in the sky with an incredulous look on his face. The boy by his side also widened his eyes in shock. The ripples of death. Just where did you, fated kin, come from? This island was formed at most 4 years ago. It's impossible for you to change this place and cause the ripples of death to erupt in just 4 years. Even the great tribe of agents would need 10 years to do this. The old man took a few steps back and let out a low roar that reverberated in the air. Su Ming looked at the valley erupting with the aura of death and heard the old eastern wastelander's words in midair. He suddenly understood the fated kin. During the 15 years in the valley in the world of Nine, the fated kin had relied on everything in the valley to struggle and fight back. This sort of experience had made them skilled in using the terrain. More accurately speaking, they were skilled in using the aura of death. Ever since Imu came to the island, he had been shocked time and time again. At that moment, his shock was especially deep in his heart. He stared at the valley with a dumbfounded expression and felt his skin crawl. The fated kin's strength had once again surpassed his imagination. He would never have imagined that once the fated kin truly rose to power and became the matchless race in all the berserkers and Death region, they would possess such a distinct characteristic. Their tribe would always choose the valley. Their weapon of choice was always that amazing bow. There would always be a thick aura of death under their tribe. Similarly, their dead tribesmen would always be buried under the altars they created at the back of the valley. They would become a part of the aura of death, a form of protection from their ancestors in the truest sense of the word. Do you still want to fight? If you want to fight, then we fated kin will fight you to the end. But even if we die in the end, you must be prepared to constantly be on guard against the people from the other tribes of fated kin who will hunt you down. Because we are fated kin, and our souls are together. If you kill one of us, the entire fated kin will be able to sense it. Our respected Senior Mo will also let you know what hell is and what hell is. The old fated kin said coldly, lifting his head. All of them, including the children, looked at him coldly. The fourth watch will shake eastern wastelands in the middle of the night, and it will begin soon. If you like this work, please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 567. It's the last few hours of September. Are there still monthly votes? It's fine even if you don't have monthly votes. Are there still mooncakes? It will be distributed in the wee hours of the morning. Begging for monthly votes, begging for mooncakes. I like to eat bean paste stuffing. Don't say there aren't any mooncakes. Today, every household will have mooncakes. I wish everyone a happy Mid-Autumn Festival, a happy National Day, and a lifetime of happiness. The poor ear root was still writing. For an author, holidays were not much different from other days. Between a family and many readers, they would usually choose the latter. This was a responsibility, not a job. He continued to write. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 568. Yamu stared at the fated kin with a dumbfounded expression. His mind was blank at that moment. He suddenly felt that coming to the fated kin's island while fleeing was the correct decision. The old man in midair had a dark expression on his face. As a berserker in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm, he could be considered as a powerful berserker in eastern wastelands. But as he faced the dozen-something weak people on this small island, he felt a wave of wariness. That wariness was very direct and very clear. That wariness came from a murderous aura and aloofness from the dozen-something people on the island. Even the children were indifferent. It was not that he had never met this sort of people before, but he had never met a race like this. Fated kin, I will remember this, the old man said languidly after some time. Once I kill all of you, I will tell all the tribes in eastern wastelands that there is a fated kin in the land of South Morning, and all of them must be killed on sight. The old man's ghastly words were filled with killing intent and chilling intent, but did not make the dozen-something fated kin's expressions change in the slightest. Even the children were fearless. Their expressions were still as aloof as ever. That aloofness made even Yamu feel chills run down his spine when he saw it. As for the old eastern wastelands who was their enemy, disgust appeared in his eyes. With a cold harumph, he lifted his right hand and swung it before him. Instantly, the world rumbled, and as a large amount of clouds tumbled before him, a gigantic statue of 300-something feet tall descended slowly. When that statue appeared, the entire world was filled with a powerful pressure. This was no statue, it was clearly the statue of the old man in the Berserker Soul Realm. The appearance of this statue meant that the old man had already brought out his full strength and wanted to kill all the people here. The dozen-something fated kin sat down with aloof expressions on their faces and gathered together to surround Su Ming's statue. They closed their eyes and no longer bothered themselves with the old man and his statue of the god of berserkers in the sky. Instead, they started mumbling under their breath. We fated kin were born in barren sky, and we have worshipped you for generations, respected Senior Mo. Respected Senior Mo was a god. We fought for our lives, and we wanted to control our own destinies. The heavens have no eyes, the earth has no tears, and the heavens have no thoughts. They made us fated kin be abandoned and lose our future. Make us gather together. Make us rise to power for our lives. Yamu and the female berserker stared blankly at the fated kin by the side. To them, the fated kin had gone mad, and the strangeness of the fated kin also caused their faces to turn pale. The old eastern wastelander in the sky laughed coldly and pointed at the island with his right hand. Immediately, a piercing dark light shone from his statue of the god of berserkers. Under that dark light, the statue melted and turned into hundreds of rays of dark light that charged towards the ground. The ghostly light howled and turned into hideous ghostly faces that charged toward all the living beings on the island to devour them. This is the final strike the fated kin left behind for themselves. They offer up their lives and fuse with the aura of death to let out their final cry of life and their struggle against fate. Su Ming stood up and walked towards the dozen-something fated kin who were sitting down cross-legged. He did not seem to be moving quickly, but with just one step, he stood on the head of the stone statue, surrounded by the fated kin. The instant he stood there, a gentle ripple spread out and stopped the fated kin from offering up their lives. The instant they opened their eyes, there was only one person in their sight. Su Ming stood on the stone statue. His long hair danced in the sea breeze. His white robes fluttered in the wind. His profound eyes and the presence that could replace the sky itself. Respected Senior Mo, all the fated kin shuddered, and the aloofness on their faces that seemed to have never changed for a long time immediately melted away. In its place was a zealous look that would make all those who saw it feel apprehensive. This zealous look was a stark contrast to their previous aloofness. Su Ming swept his gaze past the fated kin and nodded. At that moment, the hundreds of ghostly faces in the sky that had turned into hundreds of ghostly faces had opened their mouths wide and were charging towards them. It's over. Su Ming turned around, and the instant he looked towards the sky, golden light shone in his eyes. He lifted his right hand and hurled a punch toward the sky. The moment his fist landed, a violent gust of wind stirred up from the ground with Su Ming as its center, and it charged towards the sky along with Su Ming's fist. That gust of wind came too suddenly, and the instant moaning sounds rang in the air. It rushed towards the sky from the ground. Wherever it went and touched the dark light, booming sounds would immediately reverberate in the air, and the dark light would shatter without a hint of resistance. In an instant, once the violent gust of wind that Su Ming had lifted destroyed all the dark light, it rushed towards the clouds in the sky. Once it crashed into the clouds, a loud bang that shook the sky rang out. The clouds trembled and scattered before they tumbled in all directions. The old Eastern Wastelander's expression changed drastically. He glared at Su Ming, who had suddenly appeared, and a huge storm raged in his heart. He was shocked. He had not noticed that there was someone else on the island. Su Ming's appearance had forced his way into his sight, and the presence that had stirred up when he attacked also made him feel apprehensive. All of these things could only mean one thing. The young man before him had a power that surpassed his own. The fated kin in this place had already shocked him to begin with, and now another person who had shocked him had appeared. The old man did not hesitate in the slightest. He grabbed the boy beside him and quickly retreated. Without a single word, he wanted to flee. Su Ming's expression was calm. He took a step forward while standing on the stone statue, and once his foot landed, his body disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already right before the retreating old man. Without a single word, Su Ming lifted his right hand once he appeared and pointed at the center of the old man's brows. That one finger seemed to have turned into the laws of the world in the old man's eyes, making him feel as if his soul was about to scatter and that he could not fight back. He widened his eyes and let out a low roar. At that moment, he no longer cared whether he was in a pathetic state or not. All his berserker marks instantly appeared on his body and turned into the illusion of a gigantic mountain before him. That illusion looked as if it wanted to envelop Su Ming within and seal him. Bang! The old man let out a low roar as he retreated. At the same time, light shone at the center of his brows, and immediately his statue of the god of berserkers appeared before him once again. This time, the statue of the god of berserkers was even more corporeal than the one that appeared before. The old man was still not at ease. He lifted his left hand, and a gigantic cauldron immediately appeared on his palm. That cauldron was square, and once it appeared, there were 4 strange beasts carved on the 4 sides of the cauldron. At that moment, the 4 beasts woke up and roared, causing the cauldron to move. Yet almost the instant he uttered the word bang, the illusionary mountain that enveloped Su Ming exploded with a bang. The instant it shattered, Su Ming's finger pressed against the old man's statue of the god of berserkers without stopping for even a single moment. Booming sounds reverberated in the air. The statue shuddered and immediately shattered into pieces, turning into bloody shards that spread out. The retreating old man coughed out blood, and as his face filled with shock, he saw the black-haired young man touching the square cauldron before him with just one finger. The cauldron let out a buzzing sound, and huge cracks appeared on it. It shattered right down the middle and split into 2 halves that shot out to the left and right, causing the old man to no longer have any barrier between him and Su Ming. Su Ming's aloof finger landed at the center of the old man's brows with lightning speed. The old man trembled viciously, but the instant he was touched, he bit the tip of his tongue and coughed up blood on the boy whose wrist he held. Before the boy could even let out a scream of pain, his body started rapidly withering away, and in the end he exploded with a bang and turned into a pile of flesh and blood. At the same time, the old man swiftly retreated. He had actually managed to survive under Su Ming's finger. However, he had only managed to survive because he had executed a secret art that would bring him endless trouble during the most critical moment and had his disciple die in his place. Great completion in the Berserker soul realm. You're a Berserker who has attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm. The old Eastern Wastelander was in an incredibly pathetic state at that moment, but he was in a life and death crisis, so there was no way he could care about this. His eyes went wide, and disbelief appeared in his eyes. During that instant just now, he had sensed a great sense of death and terror that he could not fight against from Su Ming's finger. To him, a Berserker in the later stage of the Berserker soul realm was definitely not capable of giving him such a feeling with just one finger. Only a Berserker who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm could do such a thing. The terror in his heart drowned him like a wave that surged into the sky. He might be a Berserker in the middle stage of the Berserker soul realm, but he was still a human and not a soul that could think. He would also feel fear and terror, and he would also lose his composure, but it was rare. However, when he ran into someone who he believed had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm, it was inevitable that he would be so shocked. After all, there were only 6 Berserkers who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm in the entire Eastern Wastelands. Every single one of them had an illustrious and incomparable reputation. As he retreated, his heart was in a mess. In his anguish, he could not help but remember his disciple telling him to fish not too long ago. Right then, he had indeed caught a fish, but this fish was not something he could fight against. He knew that before a Berserker who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm, it was impossible for him to escape. At that moment, he decided that he might as well stop running. Instead, as if he had gone mad, he lifted his right hand and pushed down at the center of his brows. Immediately, Berserker marks appeared all over his body, and they looked as if they were burning. This was the unique divine ability of those in the Berserker soul realm, burning Berserker marks. His chi continued rising nonstop. His eyes turned bloodshot, and just when he was about to cast his divine ability without care for anything else, a cold voice reached his ears. A cold voice echoed in his ears. That voice became his life force, a sentence that would last for eternity. My left hand represents the past, the reversal of time, and the moment of destiny. At the instant he heard that voice, he felt as if the world around him had instantly changed. The burning Berserker marks on his body were extinguished, and his retreating footsteps were reversed. In the midst of his confusion, he saw Su Ming's figure, and the sharp pain he felt when that finger touched the center of his brows. Then, everything turned dark. The only thing that remained in his ears was the clear sound of his soul shattering. In the eyes of the fated kin, Yamu, and the female Berserker, they saw the old Eastern Wastelander suddenly take a few steps forward while he was originally retreating, as if he was offering himself to Su Ming's lifted finger. His head exploded, and his body fell to the ground. His storage bag flew out on its own, and Su Ming caught it. "We fated kin greet you, respected Senior Mo." The dozen-something fated kin beside Yamu knelt down on the ground and looked at Su Ming with zealous gazes. Yamu stared at Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression. He felt that this respected Senior Mo was incredibly familiar. Disbelief appeared in the eyes of the female Berserker beside him at that moment. Su Ming, disciple Ni Ziyin, it's been a long time. How is my second senior brother?" Su Ming's gaze fell on the female Berserker in midair, and he felt as if time had passed. 20 years, I've sent my 4th update. I'll leave in September, and I'll return in October. I'll continue with double the number. I'm begging for a guaranteed monthly ticket for October. National Day was a celebration for a powerful country. He was looking forward to this year's National Day. He was looking forward to the military of a powerful country, and he was looking forward to a certain island being shocked. I'm also looking forward to the monthly votes for begging for the Demon Realm in October. I'm begging for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 569. During the 10th month of every year, the world will be decided in 7 days. It will be decided in 7 days, and it is rare for anyone to make a comeback. That's why if the distance between us is too far apart during these 7 days, then it will be difficult for us to catch up even if we use the remaining 28 days. Please, everyone, gather your monthly votes during these 7 days and cast them. We will continue doing so until it is difficult for us to do so. Today, we will continue doing so, and Su Ming's rise to power in Eastern Wastelands will truly begin. The faces we have not seen for a long time will also appear one by one. I beg for a guaranteed monthly vote. I beg for a guaranteed monthly vote for October. Today is not just the beginning of a month. It is also the beginning of the recommendation votes. It is also the beginning of the Devil's Seal. We cannot lose the recommendation votes. I beg for recommendation votes. I beg for a guaranteed monthly vote. Every single word I say comes from the bottom of my heart, and it is difficult for words to express my feelings right now. Fellow Taoist, please help me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Start Point to cast a recommendation vote and a monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 570. At the instant Ziyin recognized Su Ming as her fellow disciple from the Ninth Summit, her eyes went wide. She could not believe what she was seeing. In truth, she had been a little uncertain before, but when Su Ming called her his disciple nephew, it had struck her like a bolt of lightning, causing her to be stunned. Are you really Su Ming? Ziyin looked at Su Ming. Even at this moment, she still found it difficult to fuse the person from the Ninth Summit in her memories with this person who could kill a powerful berserker in the middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm with just a wave of his hand. You have to call me Uncle Master. Su Ming looked at Ziyin, and a smile appeared on his face. To him, this woman before him was not only Ziche's older sister, she was also the person his second senior brother seemed to admire. Uncle Master Su. Ziyin hesitated for a moment, then instinctively wrapped her fist in her palm and bowed towards Su Ming. There was still shock in her eyes. It's been many years since I returned to the land of berserkers. I wonder how the Ninth Summit is. Su Ming looked at the woman before him. She was no longer as glorious as she was in the past. The slim and graceful girl of the past did not look like a middle-aged woman either. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes might not be very obvious, but some of them could still be seen. Time passed by gently on the woman's body. It did not take away much of it, but it left behind an ancient air and maturity. The girl of the past had now turned into a woman with a great charm. She had been beautiful in the past, and even though she was old, she still looked captivating. There was a charm about her that was completely different from that of a young girl. However, judging by the distance between her and Yamu, it seemed like their relationship was not ordinary. At that moment, when Ziyin heard Su Ming's question, she forced down the shock in her heart and replaced it with a complicated look. She had not expected that Su Ming, who had disappeared 20 years ago, would appear before her and become so powerful. This sort of strength was something that she had not even dared to dream about. At that moment, he could be said to be her Uncle Master in name and in reality, causing respect to appear on Ziyin's face without her knowing it, mixed with complicated feelings. Freezing Sky Clan split up 5 years ago. Heaven Gate left with many outstanding disciples to fight against the calamity of the Eastern Wastelands above the 9 heavens with the power of Heaven Gate. The Earth Peak is still there, but it has already been abandoned. Most of the people from the other peaks have scattered, and I left with a few of our sisters. We went through many things on the way, until we met Senior Yinlai. When she said this, Ziyan's expression became a little gloomy, and she found it hard to speak. As for the Ninth Summit, the sect was in chaos at that time. I didn't pay too much attention to it. When Ziyin said those words, she saw Su Ming frowning slightly. But I remember that second martial uncle went out a few years before the great chaos, and he never came back, Ziyin hurriedly said. Su Ming fell silent. After a long while, he lifted his head and looked in the direction of the berserkers in the distance. Where's my master? Grandmaster Tian Xiezi, I don't know, but I know that Martial Uncle Su your first senior brother finished his closed-door training 5 years after the Great War of Voodoo Barbarians. I don't know whether he has returned or not." She looked at Su Ming. They might not have met for 20 years, but the memories of the past were still fresh in her mind. There was no way she could not tell that the second Uncle Master of the Ninth Summit liked her. However, as she thought back to it, besides bitterness, Ziyin also felt as if the world had changed. If I had been with his second senior brother, then now. Ziyin felt a stab of pain in her heart, but she remained silent. Yamu was in a daze as he listened to Ziyin and Su Ming's conversation. Gradually, his eyes went wide, and he looked at Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression. His breathing instantly quickened. "Mo Su, respected senior Mo. Su Ming." As Yamu looked at Su Ming, his mind was in a mess. He recognized Su Ming. He recognized him as the person who had talked to him for a long time by the bonfire in Autumn Sea Tribe. He also recognized him. "I am Yamu. Greetings, senior. I will never forget your kindness in giving me a new lease of life." Yamu took a few steps back and wrapped his fist in his palm before bowing deeply towards Su Ming. He was bowing to Hong Luo, as well as to how Hong Luo had given Autumn Sea Tribe's ladder shaman's life force to Yamu when Hong Luo had killed him. That was why Yamu was now half a step into becoming a ladder shaman. As time passed by, most of the things that happened in the past were slowly learned by those who paid attention to them, especially those who had met Su Ming before and were acquainted with him. I didn't expect that Senior Mo would be from the same clan as my wife. She's from the Berserker's Freezing Sky clan. Yamu's expression was incredibly respectful, and once he stood up, he sighed with emotion. "Wife." A focused glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He did not know Yamu for long and could not be considered to be friends with him. He could only be considered as an old friend, and his relationship with Ziyin was completely different. The focused look in Su Ming's eyes was like a flash of golden light in the eyes of others, and a mighty pressure that pressed down on people's souls abruptly shot out from his eyes, causing Yamu to feel as if his mind was about to crumble once he saw it. He moved back once again, and a loud bang rang in his head. It was as if he had turned into a lone boat in a raging sea and was about to collapse at any moment. That pressure made Yamu's expression change drastically, and he almost stopped breathing. In his eyes, Su Ming had occupied his entire mind at that moment, and it was as if he only needed one thought, and Yamu's life force would immediately be extinguished and he would die. Ziyin quickly moved forward and blocked Su Ming's gaze as he looked at Yamu. There was a complicated look on her face, and there was an ancient air left behind by time. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. "This is your personal matter. It has nothing to do with me. I just don't understand why my second senior brother isn't good enough for you." Su Ming frowned and looked at Ziyin before he shook his head. "You can leave." Ziyin's face was pale. In silence, she wrapped her fist in her palm towards Su Ming and pulled the still slightly dazed Yamu. Just as the two of them were about to leave, Ziyin hesitated for a moment before she turned her head around to look at Su Ming. Uncle Master Su, do you still remember Han Songzi? After the change in the school, she came here with me. If you still remember her, I would like to beg you to help her." Ziyin looked at Su Ming and spoke softly. "For the sake of us being fellow disciples, and for the fact that she had a crush on you in the past, Uncle Master Su, please help her, Han Songzi." When Su Ming heard that name, the image of a beautiful woman appeared before his eyes. That woman's gentle gaze, her gentle personality, her determined gaze, the things that happened in Han Mountain City, the entanglement between him and Sima Exen, all of them appeared in Su Ming's memories. These memories were filled with dust, but they were becoming clearer with each passing moment. "Fong Sanglan," Su Ming said calmly. "Yes, junior sister Fong." When Ziyin saw Su Ming calling out Han Songzi's name, excitement appeared in her eyes. Ziyin looked at Su Ming and immediately said urgently, "For years ago, Senior Yun Lai wanted to make junior sister Fong his concubine, but due to junior sister Fong's cultivation, he delayed it. It was the same 2 years ago, but now junior sister Fong's cultivation method is about to be completed, and it's difficult for us to delay it. Once Senior Yun Lai comes out of isolation and makes this request again, Junior Sister Fong won't be able to reject it. Su Ming fell silent. The woman's figure in his memories became clearer, and when he recalled all the things that happened in the past, he felt as if there was a veil separating them. 20 years was not a long time, but the countless cycles of life and death Su Ming had gone through in the undying and imperishable world caused an ancient air to appear on his face, and no one else could see it. Ziyan was still waiting for Su Ming's answer. However, as time passed by and Yamu regained his senses and looked at Su Ming in fear, Su Ming still did not speak. He stood there and looked into the distance, and no one knew what he was thinking. Ziyan's face turned paler, and eventually she looked at Su Ming with a broken smile, and her eyes gradually became wet. "Oh well, this isn't your problem. There's no reason for you to help me. I know that your second senior brother was fond of me in the past. If time could flow back and I could return to the past, then I would choose to accept it, but that's impossible, isn't it? Yamu is right. I'm his dual cultivation partner, and I'm no longer the same as I was in my youth. Not only am I his dual cultivation partner, I was even Senior Yun Lai's concubine in the past, and he gave me to Yamu in the form of an item." Ziyan's face was pale, and as she laughed brokenly, her voice sounded rather forlorn. Tears fell down her cheeks non-stop, as if she could no longer hold it in after suppressing it for many years, and her tears burst forth. "You can look down on me, but you're not me. You'll never be able to understand how a woman can survive when she's abandoned by her sect, when she has to face the disaster of the eastern wastelands that can come at any moment, and when the land of berserkers is in chaos. Songlan's personality is a little weak. The two of us were in the chaos before the disaster. There was no order in this world, and everything was a law that only the strong could survive. How could we survive? Then, we met Senior Yun Lai. He took a fancy to Tsang Lan, but there was tenacity within her weakness. She would rather die than submit to him. I was the one who took her place and became Senior Yun Lai's concubine. I tried everything I could to please him, and only then did we manage to survive the disaster and come to the land of the shamans. Everyone has the right to choose to live. Even if it's wrong, as long as we can live, then it's the right choice. You don't have to help Songlan. Just pretend that she had the wrong person in her heart 20 years ago." Ziyan wiped away her tears, and determination appeared in her eyes. She no longer looked at Su Ming, but instead turned into a long arc and charged into the sky. Yamu followed behind her silently. When he looked at Ziyan, there was a deep gentleness and pity in his eyes, along with a protective look hidden within them. He liked Ziyan. When he saw her for the first time a few years ago, he fell in love with this woman who was usually beautiful, but had sadness hidden within her heart. That sort of adoration was something that Yamu had seen by chance. He had seen her standing alone next to a submerged reef, looking out at the sea. Her eyes had been filled with tears, and she had looked exhausted. That had become an eternal memory in Yamu's heart. That was why he begged in Shaman Zhongzhe and paid a huge price to buy Ziyan from Yun Lai, who Yun Lai was already sick of. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at Ziyan and Yamu leaving. His expression might have been calm, but his heart had been shaken by Ziyan's words. "Where is she?" Su Ming asked languidly. He had never intended to refuse her, but a moment of absent-mindedness had caused Ziyan to misunderstand him. "The first update was late today. Please forgive me, everyone. The second update will be released soon. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 571. Southern Swamp Island. Ziyan froze in midair and immediately turned her head around to cast her gaze on Su Ming. "Wait for me here for a few days. Then, I'll go with you to Southern Swamp Island." Su Ming's voice was calm, but it caused joy and anguish to mix together in Ziyan's heart. She looked at Su Ming and nodded. Yamu would never argue against Ziyan's decision sometimes. Instead, he quietly agreed to her invitation and words. He did not leave, but chose to stay on the island. When the fated kin saw Su Ming, The fanaticism in their eyes seemed to be able to shake the world. It was as if with just one word from Su Ming, they would give up everything for him. This was not something that had happened overnight. This was the impression Su Ming had left in their hearts over the years, along with all the things that had happened when they worshipped him when they left the world of Nine. The fated kin were different, causing it to be difficult for them to get along with outsiders for a long period of time. Their aloofness and their abandonment caused them to not trust outsiders. They only believed in themselves and their own people. They did not have too many distracting thoughts in their lives. The 15 years of living in the world of Nine had changed them greatly, including their attitude towards cultivation. Almost all the fated kin who had survived during these 15 years had spent their entire day training. Only by becoming stronger and enduring the loneliness that other people could not endure could they survive and control their own destiny. That was why they rejected Yagmu's invitation to stay on the island after gathering a dozen-something people and isolated themselves from the world. Then, they modified the island and turned it into a place that was suitable for them to live in. That was why Su Ming did not try to persuade the fated kin to leave with him. Instead, he spent 3 days on the island to set up everything in detail. The first thing he did was strengthen the protective rune on the island. With Su Ming's current level of cultivation, he activated all the runes who Z had taught him in the past and turned them into the island's first line of defense. Then, he dived into the depths of the Dead Sea. When he returned, there were 8 Dead Sea giants surrounding the bottom of the sea around the island. They were sitting cross-legged, and they no longer had souls. Their souls had been taken away by spirit plunder. Once he gave 1 spirit plunder to the fated kin, if the island ran into danger again, then these 8 Dead Sea giants would become the second line of defense for the island. Once he finished doing all this, Su Ming held the 2 bows in his hands and used all his power in the bone sacrifice realm to comb through them, causing the power of the bows to become sharper once he drew them. This was his 3rd layer of defense. That was not the end. Su Ming might not have any understanding towards the ripples of the aura of death, but based on the fated kin's understanding, Su Ming had made arrangements based on their thoughts, causing the ripples of the aura of death in this place to become stronger than before once they erupted. This was the 4th layer of defense. Just this alone was not enough for Su Ming to feel at ease. After all, he was in the Dead Sea. Not only would he face the disaster from eastern wastelands, he would also face the invasion of the ferocious beasts from the Dead Sea. That was why he had left a wisp of his divine sense behind and had it gather on his statue. With the power of the statue and his divine sense, he could allow the statue to have 3 spiritual attacks that were equivalent to the power of his incarnation. This was the 5th layer of defense. The poison corpse was the 6th layer of defense Su Ming left behind for the fated kin in this place. With the poison corpse and the numerous methods in this place, if another berserker in the middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm came, then Su Ming would not even need to do anything. The numerous defenses in this place would be enough to force them to retreat, unless they ran into a large group of invaders. However, Su Ming was also prepared for this sort of thing. With the method Hong Luo had left in his legacy, he had set up a simple relocation rune in this place. Su Ming's spirit stones were the power to activate the rune, and the fated kin could use this rune to leave in times of danger. Due to Su Ming's arrangements, not only did the island turn into an impregnable fortress, it also gave the fated kin a chance to go out and search for more of their kind in the past. This was not only a fated kin's tribe, but also a temporary training spot for Su Ming among the many islands in the Dead Sea. In this place, his heart would be filled with boundless peace, because in this place he was their god. Once he finished making these arrangements, all the fated kin knelt down on one knee and worshipped towards the sky. Su Ming, Ziyin, and Yamu left under the voices calling him respected senior MO and their zealous gazes. Even when Yamu left, he still felt as if he was dreaming. The fated kin's strength, their mysteriousness, the aloofness on their faces, and the zealousness when they saw Su Ming. All of these things were deeply branded into his memories, causing him to be unable to forget them for the rest of his life. he would never be able to get rid of the impression he had towards the fated kin. When he left, Su Ming did not speak much. He only talked about the matters in southern Swamp Island. In his silence, it was as if the air around him had become slightly oppressive. Ziyin and Yamu continued charging forward with Su Ming in the midst of this oppressive atmosphere. Several days later, the three of them stopped on a vast stretch of sea about 10,000 lis away from the fated kin's island. "Senior Su, this is southern Swamp Island," Yamu said respectfully by the side. Su Ming's gaze fell on the area beneath him. This place was empty, and not a single island could be seen. Even if Su Ming spread his divine sense to search, he still could not find anything. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he lifted his head to look at the dark clouds in the sky. When he lowered his head once again, he spread his divine sense outwards, and this time he charged towards the bottom of the sea. Gradually, a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. The bottom of the sea was murky, and there was a power that rejected divine senses, but Su Ming could still sense that there was something different about the bottom of the sea. However, this difference was very difficult to grasp. If he did not look closely, it would be very difficult for him to see it. Su Ming retrieved his divine sense and said languidly, "There is indeed something strange about southern Swamp Island that allowed it to become one of the few gathering spots for the people of South Mourning after the calamity, and it was not discovered by the cultivators from Eastern Wastelands." Yamu wrapped his fist in his palm respectfully towards Su Ming and took a few steps forward. As he lifted his right hand, an incredibly normal-looking jade slip appeared on his palm. He held that jade slip in his hand and threw it forward. Immediately, the jade slip turned into a long arc that charged towards the seemingly empty sea beneath him. Without a single sound, the jade slip fell into the sea and was submerged by the waves. 10 breaths after the jade slip was submerged, Yamu made some calculations in silence, then suddenly lifted his right hand and formed a few strange seals before he pointed at the air beneath him. With that one tap, the seawater beneath him immediately started rumbling and started tumbling back and forth. At the same time, 2 indistinct figures swiftly became clear in the air above the sea and stepped out. They were 2 middle-aged men. These 2 people wore simple robes, and their gazes were like lightning. One of them was a shaman, and the other was a berserker. The shaman was a medial shaman, and the berserker was a berserker in the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm. The instant these 2 people appeared, their gazes fell on Yamu and Ziyin. Then when they looked towards Su Ming, a freezing glare appeared in their eyes. They could not tell Su Ming's level of cultivation, but his face was incredibly unfamiliar. "Messenger Yamu, who is this?" the middle-aged medial shaman asked coldly. "This Senior Su saved my life. Don't be rash. I'll be your guarantor, so open the tunnel." A stern look appeared on Yamu's face. The 2 shamans and berserkers, who were clearly guards, hesitated for a moment before the middle-aged berserker wrapped his fist in his palm towards Yamu and Ziyin. "Southern Swamp Palace gave us an order a few days ago. During this period of time, we are strictly forbidden from bringing outsiders into Southern Swamp Island. This is our duty. Messenger Yamu and Messenger Ziyin, you may enter first. Once you obtain the letter of guarantee, we will naturally let this person in." Yamu was momentarily stunned. Southern Swamp Palace was the place where Zhong Zhe and Yun Lai, the 2 guardians of the island, were in charge of all matters on the island after they went into isolation. They would usually not give such an order unless, could it be that someone from Sir Zhong Zhe and Sir Yun Lai is coming out? Yamu immediately asked, "We don't know about this, but if this person doesn't have a letter of guarantee, he cannot enter," the male shaman said coldly. Yamu was slightly hesitant. He looked towards Ziyin, and she frowned. Just as she was about to speak, Su Ming walked forward with a calm look on his face. As he walked forward, the 2 middle-aged shaman and berserker guards instantly became wary. Yet right at the moment they became wary, confusion immediately appeared in their eyes when they saw Su Ming's eyes. They stood where they were, stunned, and simply allowed Su Ming to walk past them. Yamu's heart trembled, and he found Su Ming to be even more bizarre and unfathomable. The words the old Eastern Wastelander had uttered before he died about attaining great completion in the Berserker Soul realm appeared in his head once again. At that moment, he quickly moved forward and personally activated the defenses of the place. Booming sounds reverberated in the air above the empty sea, and a thick screen of light suddenly manifested. That screen of light covered an area of several hundreds of leagues, and it looked like a huge bowl that had been turned upside down. Ziyin was also struck by Su Ming's bizarre actions, and the same thoughts as Yamu's rose in her heart. She followed behind him, and the three of them stepped into the screen of light. As they disappeared, the screen of light also gradually faded away. The bewilderment in the eyes of the two middle-aged men in midair disappeared after some time. They could only vaguely remember that Yamu and Ziyin had just returned to the island, and they had no recollection of Su Ming at all. This was the power of a soul catcher, a part of the Candle Dragon's curse. In the current shaman tribe, there was no one else besides Su Ming who could use the power of a soul catcher to this extent. Even the end soul catcher, Zhongzhe, would find it impossible to do this unless he used other methods. At the instant he stepped into the screen of light, Su Ming immediately noticed a relocation power surrounding him. Once that power disappeared, what appeared before him was a gigantic rune. There were 8 people sitting cross-legged around it, and at that moment, they were all looking towards him. Beyond the rune was a mountain range that rose and fell. There were numerous towers on the mountain range, and all of them looked incredibly beautiful from the distance. In fact, Su Ming could even see cave abodes built on the mountain range. He could even vaguely see the outline of a simple city surrounded by the mountain range. The entire area was bright. There were no clouds in the sky. It was a clear blue sky, and there was a sun shining brightly. Everything was like paradise, and it was completely different from the outside world. The second update is here, and there will be a third and a fourth update. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 572. Yamu would go up and talk to the people who were looking at him. Su Ming walked out of the rune with a calm expression and looked at the sun in the sky. As he narrowed his eyes, the sun slowly turned transparent in his eyes, revealing a rune formed by nearly 100 spirit stones within. The rune's function was to shine and radiate heat, causing all those who looked at it to feel as if they were looking at the sun. The clear blue sky was also peeled off layer by layer before Su Ming's eyes, revealing the dark seawater behind it. This was a protective screen of light. Perhaps it could serve as a form of concealment outside, but within it, it had turned into a blue sky. This was an island that had sunk to the bottom of the sea. Perhaps it had not sunk to begin with, but someone had used mana to make it sink deep into the sea, causing this place to be isolated from the outside world. No matter how the people from Eastern Wastelands searched for it, it would be difficult for them to find Southern Swamp. Su Ming spread his divine sense outwards and instantly swept through the entire Southern Swamp Island. As he spread his divine sense outwards, he immediately noticed 2 powerful ripples coming from 2 places. One of them was familiar to Su Ming, and it was naturally from Zhongzhe. The other was slightly mixed up, but it was still powerful. Judging by the presence spreading out from that ripple, he could tell that it had already reached the peak of the middle stage of the Berserker Soul realm and was only 1 step away from the later stage. Perhaps more accurately speaking, he was already half a step into the later stage of the Berserker Soul realm. The instant Su Ming noticed those 2 ripples, they also noticed him. Those 2 ripples instantly spread out, but before they could search for him, Su Ming's divine sense had already disappeared without a trace, and they could not find him. At that moment, the long-haired Zhongzhe in the cave abode on the left of the 2 tallest summits in the mountain range opened his eyes swiftly. A brilliant light shone in his eyes, and he stood up. With 1 step, he appeared outside the cave abode and stood on the mountain. His long robes fluttered in the wind, and he placed his hands behind his back. With a grave expression, he looked towards the ground. What a powerful presence. Looks like we have guests, Zhongzhe mumbled. Zhongzhe murmured. His appearance was not much different from back then, just that he seemed a little older, and there was a hidden aura of death on his body. Almost at the instant Zhong Zhe walked out, a man sat cross-legged in the cave on the right side of the mountain. This cave was extremely luxurious, filled with jewels, and there was even the sound of someone panting. In the main room of the cave sat a naked man. His body was bronze in color, and he had no hair on his head. His expression was cold, and there was not the slightest hint of emotion on his face. He was surrounded by 7 completely naked women, all of whom had their arms around his body. Their expressions were blurry and lustful, and their bodies wriggled as if they were begging for sex. Panting could be heard, and anyone who heard them would find it difficult to control themselves. These 7 women were all very beautiful, especially their flushed skin, which was filled with a soul-stirring attraction. The instant Su Ming scanned the area with his divine sense, the bald man who had been meditating with his eyes closed opened his eyes. His expression changed, and with one move, he left the cave just like that. When he appeared in midair, a long white robe appeared on his body. He stood in midair, and once he looked at Zhong Zhe from the distance, he also cast his gaze downwards. I can't find this person. Is he a powerful shaman? His presence disappeared the moment it appeared. It's difficult to tell, Zhong Zhe said languidly with a calm expression on his face as he stood in the distance. The bald man fell into a moment of pensive silence before he said coldly, "Seal the rune to get out. No matter who he is, he'll still show up." Almost the moment Zhong Zhe and the bald man searched for Su Ming's presence, Su Ming, who was standing outside the rune, acted as if he did not exist, causing Zhong Zhe and the bald middle-aged man to not notice him. The Immortal's restraining presence art is very ingenious. Su Ming slowly unclenched his right hand, which was still in the midst of forming a seal. At that moment, Yamu and Zi Yin did not notice what had happened just now. Once they finished explaining to the 8 people, they went to Su Ming's side. "Senior Su, I'll take you to see Junior Sister Fong now," Zi Yin said softly. "There's no need. I can go by myself," Su Ming said flatly. He took a step forward and disappeared from the spot in the span of breath. Zi Yin was momentarily stunned. Then a slightly melancholic look appeared on her face. She looked at the mountain range in the distance and mumbled in a voice that only she could hear. "Songlan, he's here. Compared to you, you're blessed, but I don't regret the decision I made in the past. If I want to survive, then one of us will have to give up a lot." Ziyin felt slightly bitter in her heart. In the midst of her melancholy and complicated feelings, she remembered that person who liked to turn his face to the side when he saw her and let the sun shine on him, who thought he was very elegant. As she thought about it, a warm embrace appeared behind her. "Ziyin," Yamu's gentle voice traveled into her ears. This voice, this embrace, interrupted her thoughts, even if she did not like that embrace, but it gave her a warmth that she had never felt before. That warmth was not love, but a form of being touched. Tears fell from the corners of Ziyan's eyes. Once she wiped them away, she turned her head around and put on a moving smile towards Yamu. "Ziyan, I will protect you. Even if the world no longer exists, even if my life ends, my soul will still be by your side, and I will use everything I have to protect you. I know that you just don't reject me. You don't like me, but I believe that one day you will change." Yamu hugged Ziyin and mumbled to himself in his heart. He was serious. However, even though Ziyin was smiling in his arms, the tears at the corners of her eyes were filled with complicated emotions. They might no longer fall, but they fell into her heart and turned into a person who stood under the sun all those years ago. There are no ifs in this world, and the body of a broken flower also has no ifs. Ziyin closed her eyes, but due to Su Ming's appearance, it was difficult for her sealed memories to be buried once again. The artificial sun in the sky slowly dimmed and turned red, turning into a setting sun. If anyone did not use their divine sense to look at it, they would not be able to tell that it was fake with their naked eyes. Under the setting sun, the shadow of a mountain range appeared on the green grass. There was a tower at the top of one of the mountains in the mountain range. The tower was very simple and elegant. There were not many decorations on it. As the setting sun shone on it, the last rays of its light dyed everything in an orange-red hue. There were originally 2 people staying in the tower, but 2 years ago, when Ziyin was given to Yamu, there was only 1 woman left in the tower. She was a woman who looked to be in her 30s. There were not many traces of time on her face, and she was in the prime of her life. Perhaps her actual age was not that young anymore, but her quiet personality made even time sigh at her and not want to remember her. She sat there calmly and looked at the setting sun in the sky. She looked at it quietly, looking at the color of the setting sun and the blue sky. Sunlight fell on her face, and it was a beautiful sight. In fact, the fine hairs on her face could even be seen under the sunlight. There was a gentleness in her calm demeanor, and it made all those who saw her want to protect her. "Master, why do you have to do this? Sir Yunlai has been very good to you over the years, and he has also been very good to me. Why don't you agree to him?" Besides, Sir Yunlai said that as long as you agree to him, he will help you break through your current level of cultivation and reach the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm, and I will become his foster son. In fact, my status in Southern Swamp Island will also rise by quite a large margin. If I can obtain Sir Yunlai's true legacy, then I will definitely be able to reach the Berserker Soul realm in this life. "Master, don't be stubborn." As the woman looked at the setting sun in the tower, discordant voices continued to ring out. There was anxiety in those voices, and the person who spoke was a boy who looked to be about 17 or 18 years of age. "Let me be quiet for a while." As the boy continued speaking, the gentle woman frowned and spoke softly. Even her voice was very gentle, as if there was not a hint of anger in her. "Master, I don't understand what you're thinking. We've been through so much hardship during the years before and after the disaster. We finally met Sir Yunlai, and he has taken a liking to you. So why are you rejecting him?" Uncle Master Ziyin didn't reject him in the past. She immediately agreed to it. "I know that she did it to protect you, but don't you have any thoughts of repaying Uncle Master Ziyin after seeing her suffering over the years?" The boy's words were hurried, and there was a faint hint of a shrill tone in them. The woman shuddered and bit her bottom lip. With Sir Yunlai's level of cultivation, he can get any woman he wants. It's just that he's an upright person and doesn't like to use force. He wants people to obey him willingly. If that wasn't the case, with your level of cultivation, would you have been able to reject Sir Yunlai? The boy continued speaking, and his tone became even sharper. As the woman trembled, she slowly turned her head around and looked at the boy. "Sir Yunlai is also the guardian of Southern Swamp Island. He gives us a safe place to live. Why do you have to not obey someone like that? Even if you become his concubine." Before the teenager could finish speaking, the woman immediately raised her hand and slapped him. "Sir Yunlai is the guardian of Southern Swamp Island." The boy staggered backwards, lifted his head, and stared at his master while shouting loudly. "Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for me. I want to become Sir Yunlai's adopted son. I want to learn Sir Yunlai's skills." The woman stared at the boy before her, at his ferocious face, and waves of pain rose in her heart. This disciple of hers might have said these words over the years, but at that moment, they were so sharp that she found them unfamiliar. She stared at the boy. His face was incredibly familiar to her, and he was vaguely similar to the person in her memories. She had been thinking of taking him in as her disciple all those years ago. "I'll fulfill your wish." "I agree. Once you become Yunlai's adopted son, you will no longer be my disciple." The woman closed her eyes, and exhaustion filled her face. The boy was stunned, then his face filled with delight. He immediately rushed out of the tower, clearly to inform his future adopted father, Yunlai. The boy's departing footsteps caused the woman's heart to ache even more. She slowly opened her eyes and stared at the setting sun in the sky. After a long, long time, "That's fake." At that moment, a lamenting voice came from behind her. "I'm begging for monthly votes. I'm begging for recommendation votes." To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come Chidian. Come and vote for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 573. At the instant that voice rang in the air, the woman shuddered. She turned around swiftly and saw that there was another person in the spot where the boy had been just now. That person was dressed in white and looked to be about 27 or 28 years old. He was incredibly handsome, but there was a scar under his eyes, causing his face to look slightly sinister. There was also an ancient look in his eyes that made all those who saw him feel as if they were immersed in the passage of time. He stood there and looked towards her quietly. His appearance was quite similar to the boy who had left just now, causing the woman to be slightly dazed at that instant. The two of them looked at each other, and time trickled by. The room was silent. After a long while, the dazed look on the woman's face disappeared. A smile appeared at the corners of her lips, and a brilliant light shone in her eyes. "I know it's fake," the woman said softly. She lifted her hand and twirled a lock of her hair. Then, she lifted her right hand, and several rays of dark light immediately charged towards Su Ming like bolts of lightning from a short distance away. The dark light exuded a freezing chill and closed in on Su Ming in an instant. The woman's attack stunned Su Ming, but an art of this level was insignificant to him. He did not dodge. A faint golden light shone on his body, and immediately, banging sounds reverberated in the air. 3 locks of hair were gathered in midair before Su Ming, and they shattered one by one. The woman also stood up at that moment and took a few steps back. With murderous intent and anger in her eyes, she glared at Su Ming. "Just who are you?" "I'm Su Ming." Su Ming cast the woman a glance and suddenly smiled. "It's impossible for Su Ming to have your level of cultivation." The woman frowned and took a few more steps back. "This is Southern Swamp Island, and there are powerful warriors protecting it. Even if you're skilled with illusions and somehow manage to learn Su Ming's appearance, this sort of trick is just too shameless," the woman said coldly. Su Ming looked at the woman before him, and his smile grew wider. It had been 20 years since they last met, and she had changed quite a lot. She might seem calm, but in truth, all those who could survive the disaster would definitely be incredibly cautious and would not easily believe in others. Even if they heard it with their own ears or saw it with their own eyes, sometimes there would still be falsehoods. Clearly, this sort of awareness existed in the woman's mind. "Then why do you think I changed into someone else's appearance and appeared before you?" Su Ming smiled and took a step forward. When he took that step forward, the woman immediately retreated, and she looked as if she was about to retreat to the door, but she did not move forward recklessly. Instead, she glared at Su Ming, and the anger in her eyes grew stronger. "To be able to transform into his appearance, you must know me very well. If you haven't met me a long time ago, then it must be related to Senior Ziyin." As the woman spoke, she took another step back. However, at the instant her foot landed, the light of a rune shone on the ground around Su Ming. That rune was filled with a fierce presence. In an instant, it started spinning rapidly and turned into 9 ice blades that appeared out of nowhere before charging towards Su Ming. Su Ming walked forward and simply allowed the weapons to close in on him. Once they exploded around him, the building immediately became filled with a freezing chill. Yet the instant Su Ming took that step forward, another rune appeared on the ground under his feet. This time there was not just one rune, but 9 of them surrounded him. As the light from the rune shone, the freezing air around him suddenly tumbled backwards. Once it was rapidly absorbed by the rune, it rushed out swiftly. That freezing air was so thick that it made Su Ming feel as if his flesh and blood were freezing, as if he was about to be frozen in an instant. It was a telling sign of its strength. Su Ming let out a soft gasp of surprise. Golden light shone on his body, and with one step, he walked straight out of the freezing air. However, the instant he walked out, cracking sounds reverberated in the air behind him, and a gigantic block of ice was formed. The woman's face was grave at that moment, but her heart was filled with shock. She had prepared this rune for Yun Lai, and she had prepared it for many years, also that she could kill him during the final moment. To everyone else, Killing a powerful berserker in the middle stage of the Berserker Soul realm was something impossible for a weak woman like her, but she believed that it was not impossible. However, when she saw the person who had turned into Su Ming avoiding her first 2 killing runes without a single scratch on his body, her confidence was shaken. Based on her calculations, while the first 2 runes might not be able to kill Yin Lai, they could make him freeze for a moment, allowing her to execute her next attack. Yet everything that happened at that moment made her heart tremble. Without any hesitation, she lifted her right hand and pointed forward. Immediately, runes appeared around Su Ming once again. This time, there were 36 of them, and they practically occupied the entire floor of the building. As the freezing air erupted forth with a bang, the woman used the momentum of the freezing air to swiftly retreat until she left the building. She seemed to have calculated the number of steps she took as she retreated, and it was precisely 13 steps. The instant she took her 13th step, a bump suddenly rose up from the ground under her feet. Once she stepped on it, light spread out from the ground in the courtyard outside the building, causing the area outside the building to turn into a gigantic rune. That rune started rotating with a bang and turned into an endless amount of black flames that surrounded the area. Once they gathered together, they turned into a black fire dragon that charged towards the building. At the same time, as the freezing air erupted from within the building, it instantly turned into a gigantic block of ice. The instant the fire dragon crashed into that block of ice, cold and heat crashed into each other, and shocking power was born. A loud bang rang in the air, and that sound should have reverberated in all directions, but strangely enough, it was contained within the mountain and did not spread out. The building collapsed, the block of ice exploded, and the black flames devoured everything, but the woman did not relax. She retreated once again as the ice building exploded, and as if she had been swept away by the impact, she retreated 100-something feet away. She lifted her hand, and a jade skull appeared in her palm. She sat down cross-legged and pressed her hands on the skull. A dark light instantly appeared in her eyes. The instant that dark light appeared in her eyes, the color of the jade skull she pressed on instantly changed from white to black. At the same time, the entire mountain trembled with a loud bang. 99 rays of black light shot up from 99 spots on the mountain, and with a powerful presence, they charged towards the place. Each of those 99 rays of black light possessed the power of those in the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm. As they closed in, the dark light on the skull in the woman's hands shone once again, and the presence of the 99 rays of black light instantly increased exponentially. They possessed the power of those in the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm, and in an instant, they charged towards the spot where the building had exploded. Su Ming had just walked out of the collapsing ice with a resigned look on his face, but in an instant, his expression turned grave. The 99 rays of black light did not seem strong to him, but their speed and location had sealed off all the areas where he could dodge. However, this was not what made Su Ming grave. What made him grave was the sense of danger he felt, coming from the sky. Almost the instant Su Ming noticed this danger, killing intent appeared in the woman's eyes, and she spat out a single word. Su. The moment she spat out those words, the setting sun in the sky, the sun that she had been looking at calmly all this while, the sun that she had spent most of her time looking at, the sun that she could never get enough of, suddenly became several times brighter. The hundreds of spirit stones in the setting sun instantly shattered, and a powerful ray of light shot out once the sun darkened. It shook the world, and a scene that left all the people in southern Swamp Island dumbfounded happened. That powerful ray of light seemed to have absorbed all the light from the sun, and with an incredible speed, it charged towards the mountain where the woman was, and towards Su Ming, who was in the rune, surrounded by the 99 rays of black light. A loud bang rang in the air, and the entire mountain trembled. The spot where the building was previously was shrouded in fog, and only a large sunken hole could be seen. The details could not be seen clearly. This was Han Song Zi's killing move. Everything she had done previously was to confuse the mind, even the 99 rays of black light. Perhaps this powerful ray of light would still not be able to kill a berserker in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm, but the woman clearly had other tricks up her sleeves. At that moment, she started forming seals with her hands, and just as she was about to bite the tip of her tongue, the jade bone under her right hand suddenly shone with a dark light. She instantly disappeared and reappeared 100-something feet away. No one knew whether it was a coincidence or not, but the spot where she stood was exactly the spot where Su Ming had just walked past. Su Ming took a step forward from the spot where she had disappeared. There was a wry smile on his face, but when he looked at the woman, his gaze was filled with praise. He did not expect that the frail woman in the past would be able to set up such a shocking killing trap, even though she was only in the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm. If a berserker in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm stepped into this trap, then the slightest carelessness would cause them to be heavily injured. Even a berserker in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm would have to go through some trouble. Every single step she took was within her calculations, and everything was linked to each other. Su Ming could even imagine that if he allowed the woman to continue executing her plan, then there was a high possibility that the entire southern swamp island would be used by her, and an unimaginable change would appear. When Su Ming saw that the woman was still 100-something feet away from him and still wanted to continue, he moved and closed in on her, but the instant he was about to move forward, the woman gave up on casting her art. Instead, she brought out a black dagger and placed it on her own neck. Han Songzi glared at Su Ming coldly and said calmly, "If you take one more step, I'll kill myself. There's poison in this dagger. Your level of cultivation has surpassed my expectations. I can't kill you, but since you've turned into his appearance, then you must be trying to capture me alive. If I die, you won't be able to get anything. I'm really Su Ming." Su Ming laughed bitterly, but before he could finish speaking, the dagger in Han Songzi's hand fell to the ground. Tears fell from her eyes as she stared at Su Ming blankly. The aloofness in her eyes turned into gentleness. "Su Ming, it's really you." Su Ming saw pictures flashing in her eyes, and within those pictures were Su Ming's memories from the past 20 years. This was Han Songzi's unique art. As long as someone touched or walked past a place, she would be able to see everything about that person's past. "Of course it's me. We haven't met for 20 years, and you've left a deep impression on me this time. Aren't you afraid of poisoning yourself to death?" Su Ming laughed bitterly. "If you're not Su Ming, I'd rather die. If you're Su Ming, then of course you won't let me die." Fong Sanglan blinked and smiled happily. "We're meeting an old friend who's different from the past. I hope everyone likes it. Please get recommendation votes. Please get monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 574. Happy 11th, everyone. But I'm not happy, because at the beginning of the month, your fate seems to be very strong for a moment, but later on, it will wither away until it explodes in all sorts of ways. Can you change your fate, just like the fated kin? Control your fate and become a fated kin. Su Ming did not have many fated kin at the moment, but he did not know that there were many fated kin who wanted to control their own fate on a blue planet in the universe. Are you willing to become a fated kin? Please change our fate. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 575. The sky darkened. As the sun lost its light, even the blue sky became pitch black. Only specks of starlight remained, causing the earth to seem blurry and black. This change and the powerful ripples spreading out from the mountain where Fong Sanglan was were like a bright flame in the darkness. The people in southern Swamp Island could sense it incredibly clearly. The pavilion at the top of the mountain no longer existed. It had been reduced to ruins, and there was a deep crater in the ground. There were even waves of cold air that were faintly discernible in the surroundings, spreading in all directions. Fong Lan sat cross-legged on the ground and looked at Su Ming with a happy smile on her face. Su Ming took a few steps forward and sat down before Fong Lan. His gaze fell on the woman's face, and he had a vague feeling that he had returned to the past. However, the darkness around him caused his memories to be tainted with dust. "It's been a long time," Su Ming said softly after a long while. "Not too long ago." Fong Lan smiled. She combed her hair and put away the jade bone in her hand. Su Ming stared at Fong Lan. When he saw the joy in her eyes and the face in his memories, he suddenly did not know what to say. In the darkness, on southern Swamp Island, which was located in the depths of the sea, the scenes from the past appeared before Su Ming's eyes. Time trickled by, and a long time seemed to have passed by. The smile on Fong Lan's face gradually disappeared and turned into calmness. She sighed in her heart and gradually lowered her head. Just like Su Ming, she fell silent. "How is Han Mountain City?" Su Ming asked softly. "He's gone." Fong Lan closed her eyes and murmured, "Your tribe, they've already dispersed." Fong Lan opened her eyes and looked at Su Ming's face that she could not forget even after 20 years. 20 years was not a long time, but it was not a short time either. Besides, too many things had happened during these 20 years. The two of them fell silent once more. In the darkness, it was as if they had nothing in common to say. "Ziyin told me about your experiences over the past few years." After some time, Su Ming broke the silence. "Senior sister Ziyin has sacrificed a lot for me, but I have no way to repay you," Fong Lan said softly as she bit her lower lip. "So you set up that trap just now to kill that person called Yin Lai?" Su Ming stared at the seemingly frail woman before him. It was just as he had seen her in the past. There was a tenacity hidden under that frail exterior. "It's a pity that it's already useless. I can't use it anymore." Fong Lan lowered her head and looked at her hands. Suddenly, she lifted her head and her sparkling eyes fell on Su Ming's face. "If I didn't know about other people's past divine abilities and didn't know about your experiences in the past 20 years, would we have more topics to talk about?" Su Ming opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he chose to remain silent. The woman's affection towards him had existed in the past, and it was still there now, but Su Ming did not know how to accept it. In fact, in his heart, his impression of Fong Lan was still the same as in the past. "We met in Han Mountain City. We entered Freezing Sky clan together. Sima Xian's feelings for me have already been severed back then. I thank you for this. You don't owe me anything." Fong Lan spoke softly. Her gentle voice lingered in the surroundings. She gave off the same feeling as she did, gentle and delicate. "We're friends," Su Ming said softly when he heard Fong Lan's words. "Friends. We're friends," Fong Lan mumbled. A smile appeared on her face once again. However, that smile was very different from the one she had when the two of them acknowledged each other. That smile was not one of joy, but one that contained a hint of anguish. "I already know why you came here. Either take me with you, or ignore me." Fong Lan closed her eyes once again. Su Ming fell silent. "If you won't take me with you, then why did you come? Wouldn't it be better if you let me immerse myself in my own world?" Su Ming leave. Fong Lan still had her eyes closed, but there was a resolute tone to her soft words. "I can't take you with me, but I can kill the person who forced you against your will." Su Ming looked at Fong Lan and spoke in a low voice. "There's no need. Why wouldn't I want to? If you don't want to take me with you, then I need to choose a way to survive." Fong Lan's face was calm. Her words were still as gentle as ever, but there was a hint of grief within that gentleness. Su Ming could feel it. Su Ming remained silent for a moment, then cast a complicated look at Fong Lan before he stood up quietly and walked into the distance. He could not accept Fong Lan. It was not that the girl was not outstanding enough, but Su Ming himself. He did not want to have too many attachments. Love had been buried in Dark Mountain all those years ago, and the words and actions of the girls when they were gambling on stones in the world of 9 had allowed him to see through many things. I'm really envious of Bai Su in the past. I want to know, Su Ming, over the years, which girl is the most unforgettable to you? Fong Xianji Lan's gentle voice came from behind Su Ming. Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt. Faces appeared before his eyes. Some of them were clear, some were indistinct, but eventually, all of them disappeared one by one. There was none. If there was anyone, then perhaps it was the girl called by Ling who had made Su Ming's heart race when he was still a teenager, and she was someone he could not forget even now. However, that was already in the past. You're a heartless person, Su Ming. Fong Xianji Lan seemed to have guessed what Su Ming was thinking, and she whispered softly behind him. Perhaps, Su Ming said quietly in his heart. Besides Bai Ling, there were two other girls who left the deepest impression on him. One of them was Bai Su, and the other was Tian Lan Ming. However, Bai Su did not pick up the path of return Su Ming had given her. Tian Lan Ming's silence in the world of Nine Yin, with her head lowered, and avoiding his gaze caused this deep impression to gradually turn normal. When Su Ming left and Fong Xianji Lan was the only one left on the mountain, she sat there quietly and opened her eyes. Tears fell from her eyes, causing the world before her to become a blur. I can see people's pasts, but I can't see my own future, she mumbled softly, and more tears fell from her eyes in anguish. The person she had never been able to forget over the past 20 years had appeared on this day, and his ending was the same as all those years ago. Not much had changed. Perhaps forgetting him is the best choice. Fong Xianji Lan lowered her head, but the instant she did so, a person appeared on the mountain in the distance. It was a man dressed in a long robe. He had no hair, and as he stood there, his eyes shone with a dark light. His entire person was filled with a strange and evil presence, as if he had fused together with a mountain under his feet. He looked at Fong Xianji Lan and the deep pit in the ruins around her coldly, and walked towards her. His body was like an illusion, and as he walked towards her, distortions appeared in the air until he was 100 feet away from Fong Xianji Lan. This place was prepared for me, right? That man was naturally Zi Yanxian Lai. Once he swept his gaze across the area, he looked towards the spot where the sun had originally been in the sky, and his pupils shrank. Fong Xianji Lan lifted her head and looked at Yun Lai coldly. She did not speak. The tower that previously existed in this place, and the ripples of the ruin, and it should have stopped me for a moment after I was trapped inside, Yun Lai said calmly, his gaze falling on the deep pit. Then I walked out of the tower and stepped into another ruin. This rune can freeze people, and even with my level of cultivation, I would be frozen for an instant. A hint of admiration appeared on Yun Lai's face, and he took a few more steps forward. After that, it will be the 99 waves of sword chi from this mountain. As it fills the air, I will not be able to notice the true killing intent descending from the sky. Yun Lai walked until he was 9 feet away from Fong Xianji Lan, and his gaze fell on her. I believe that you will continue to use other methods until you kill me. Not bad indeed. As expected of the woman I, Yun Lai, have taken a liking to. Such cunning, such forbearance, but that be asterisk Tcdian's plan should be part of this as well. Yun Lai suddenly smiled. Honestly, I really don't understand. Where does your hatred towards me come from? If it wasn't for me all those years ago, you, and that be asterisk TCHC, you would have ended up in a very wretched state. If it wasn't for me, you would have become a vengeful spirit by now. All you need to do is become my concubine. This is a trade. So where's your hatred coming from? The strong preys on the weak. This is the law of the world. If you want to survive and receive the protection of the strong, how can you not make a choice? And I treat you differently compared to others. If you don't want to, I won't force you. A few years have passed since then. Have I ever forced you in the slightest? Yun Lai shook his head and spoke slowly. Why do you have to ask a question you already know the answer to? What you want is my cultivation method and divine ability, and I've also seen your memories before, the memories from before, and after you seem to have coincidentally met me and my senior sister. Over the past few years, I've helped you many times. Let's not talk about your schemes in the past, The help you've given me is enough for me to repay you for protecting me, Fong Xianji Lan said calmly. It's not enough. I can't bear to kill you just like this, but I've changed my mind about that *TCHZ yen. I will take her back. As for you, I can't forgive you, but you have no other choice. You must become my concubine. A glint appeared in Yunlai's eyes. He took another step forward, and the distance between him and Fong Xianjilan was now less than 20 feet. He's already gone. There's no need for you to keep trying to sound me out and explain yourself. A hint of ridicule appeared in Fong Xianjilan's eyes. Also, when it comes to me, there's no such thing as a must. I, Fong Xianjilan, would rather die and become your concubine than do something I don't want. Yunlai narrowed his eyes and let out a cold harumph. He lifted his foot and took another step forward, just as he was about to close in on Fong Xianjilan. Yet the instant he lifted his foot, a bone-chilling and incredibly aloof voice suddenly came from behind him. She said she doesn't want to. Didn't you hear her? The instant that voice appeared, Yunlai turned around swiftly and saw a person who had appeared behind him at some unknown point of time. He was dressed in a long robe, had a head full of black hair, and had a handsome face, but his expression was as cold as winter. Yunlai narrowed his eyes and circulated his power of the middle stage of the Berserker Soul realm through his entire body, causing the air around him to distort as if it had been torn apart. He stood there and stared at Su Ming, then suddenly laughed. It's rare for me to run into a powerful berserker of the same generation. Since you think highly of this woman, then I've been too reckless. If you like this work, then please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 576. As Yunlai smiled, to avoid any misunderstandings, he took a few steps back and left the place where Fong Xianjilan was. In truth, when he came to this place, he had already been prepared. After all, he had first sensed the presence that swept through southern Swamp Island. Then, he sensed the change in Fong Tsonglan's mountain. Once he connected the dots, he could naturally guess the cause and effect. Besides, once he came to the mountain and saw the setup and the remaining ripples of power, he became wary of the mysterious person who had suddenly come to southern Swamp Island. Yunlai had always been a cautious person. He did not attack easily, especially when he was facing an enemy he could not see through. Su Ming, who was right in front of his eyes, was this type of person. Even if he felt that Fong Xianjilan was very important to him, this woman's personality was too fierce, and her divine abilities were strange as well. Even though her level of cultivation was not high, it was still difficult for Yunlai to forcefully subdue her, which was why he decided to use a gentle approach. However, compared to offending the person before him, his cautious personality made him choose to delay. As far as he was concerned, considering the level of his cultivation base and the fact that he was humbling himself, Meng Hao shouldn't choose to engage in conflict with him. That would give him enough time to get to know Meng Hao better. Such decisiveness in giving up was one of the main reasons why he had been able to become an overlord and survive to this day. If he wasn't confident in winning a battle, he would do his best not to fight. However, he ran into Su Ming. Su Ming's expression was cold and aloof. Almost at the instant Yunlai said those words with a smile, he took a step forward, and like an arrow that left its bow, he appeared before Yunlai in an instant. He was so quick that he closed in on Yunlai in the blink of an eye. Yunlai's expression changed, and he immediately took a few steps back. He lifted his right hand and swung it forward, and immediately the distortions around him spread out before him and charged toward Su Ming, crashing into the finger Su Ming had thrust forward as he closed in on Yunlai. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, but Su Ming remained calm. Golden light shone on his entire body, and as cracking sounds echoed in the air, he did not move back. He withstood the rebounding waves and continued moving forward. As for Yunlai, as his body trembled, he felt a huge force tumbling backwards and landing on his body, causing him to continuously retreat 100-something feet. His face turned pale, and he immediately lifted his head to glare at Su Ming, who was walking towards him. "You're going too far. I have already given up and will give this woman to you. You and I have no enmity between us. Why are you doing this?" "There is no reason for me to kill." In his eyes, Yunlai had to die. Even if it was not for Fong Songlan, just because of Ziyan's words, Su Ming would still choose to kill this person. If there was a reason, it was because he wanted to give his second senior brother an explanation. He believed that if his second senior brother was here, he would do the same. With a single move, he lifted his right hand and hurled a punch forward. That punch landed in the air, and a shocking boom immediately rang out. Yunlai let out a low growl, and as he lifted his hands, he formed a seal. Immediately, a layer of red fog appeared before him. The fog tumbled about and turned into numerous shadows. Each of them was a woman, and with shrill, piercing cries, they pounced on Su Ming from all directions. Once they crashed into Su Ming's punch in midair, the entire southern swamp island shuddered violently. All the shadows shattered, and Yunlai's expression changed continuously. He charged backwards. Su Ming walked out of the collapsing red fog and looked at Yunlai, who was leaving into the distance in midair. He lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the sky. With it, a gigantic vortex immediately appeared under the fake sky. That vortex rotated with loud rumbling sounds and charged towards Su Ming's right hand. In the blink of an eye, it was as if Su Ming had seized it with his right hand, and he swung it towards the sky. The instant he swung his arm, it was as if the vortex of wind in Su Ming's hand had exploded, turning into a violent gust of wind that swept out in all directions. In an instant, it caught up to the charging Yunlai. The instant it swept past him, streams of light flowed out of Yunlai's body. Once he managed to resist it, blood trickled down the corners of his mouth, and his footsteps faltered for a moment. The moment he faltered, Su Ming took a step forward expressionlessly and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already right before Yunlai. Terror appeared in Yunlai's eyes. The instant he attacked just now, he had immediately sensed the powerful combat prowess erupting from Su Ming's body. It was something that he could not hope to fight against. In fact, that one jab and punch from Su Ming had given Yunlai the feeling that he had when he faced the disaster of the world in the past. It was especially so in his eyes. Su Ming was completely unreasonable. He had already lowered his stance, but he still attacked. This made Yunlai furious, but there was nothing he could do about it. Damn it, this person's power is so high, and he's so unreasonable. This is... When Yunlai saw Su Ming closing in on him, a life-threatening sense of danger enveloped Yunlai's heart and soul. As he swiftly retreated, he quickly spoke once again. "Sir, please allow me to say something. I might have protected Fong Songlan for many years, but I've never touched a single hair on her head. As for that Ziyan, if it wasn't for me, she would have died a long time ago during the chaos of the disaster. This is a deal. I didn't do anything wrong." Yunlai's words did not make Su Ming stop. He took a step forward with a calm expression, and once he closed in on Yunlai once again, he swung his right hand, and instantly, a layer of thunder rumbled in the air. A dozen-something balls of lightning manifested before Su Ming, and as lightning swam through the air, these balls of lightning fused together and charged towards Yunlai. "Sir, you're so unreasonable. Do you really think that I'm afraid of you?" When Yunlai saw that Su Ming was completely ignoring him, his pupils shrank. With a low growl, he spread his arms wide, and immediately his statue of the god of berserkers manifested behind him. That statue had 9 arms and 3 eyes at the center of its brows. Once it manifested, it swiftly grew larger, and dark light shone on its body. All 9 of its arms lifted at the same time, and pressed down on Su Ming. At the same time, Yunlai bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out a mouthful of blood. That blood immediately exploded and turned into a large amount of blood mist. Yunlai stretched his right hand into the blood mist, and with one seize, a long blood-red blade was pulled out. Once he lifted it up, he sat down cross-legged in the air and started chanting. The long blood-red blade let out a buzzing sound and a murderous aura rushed into the sky. There were also the souls of nearly 100 women surrounding the blade, and they charged towards Su Ming to cut down. Su Ming remained as calm as ever. The instant the statue of the god of berserkers closed in on him, he lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the statue. That seemingly simple grab immediately caused the incoming statue of the god of berserkers to rumble and cracks to appear on its body. The instant those cracks spread out, Su Ming clenched his fist. The statue of the god of berserkers immediately exploded with a bang. Wisps of red aura separated from the statue and charged towards Su Ming's right hand. That grab and clench was one of the positive and negative divine abilities he had mastered in the undying and imperishable world. At that moment, Su Ming's right hand was surrounded by red aura. That red aura was like fog, and it was all formed when Yunlai's statue of the god of berserkers crumbled. There was also a large amount of red fog tumbling about before him, and within that fog was a long blood-red blade that was charging towards him. 9 transformations, 10 transformations, 1 voice. Su Ming stated calmly. His nascent divinity swiftly spread out and enveloped his body, turning into his nascent divinity. His nascent divinity stared at the long blade, and a brilliant light appeared in his eyes. The image of the incoming long blade gradually appeared in his nascent divinity's eyes. At the same time, red aura tumbled about in Su Ming's right hand, and it also turned into a long red blade. This was Su Ming's immortal's divine ability. The 9 transformations art from Hong Luo's 9 transformations, 10 transformations, 1 voice. That art was instantly cast and turned into the long red blade in Su Ming's right hand. He lifted it up and slashed against the long red blade that was the same as the one coming from the sky. Booming sounds spread out, and the 2 long blades shattered. However, before the shards of the blades could disappear, Su Ming let out a breath, and that breath turned into a violent gust of wind that swept up the shards of the blood blade and charged towards Yunlai. Zhongzhe, if I die, Southern Swamp Island will return to the surface of the sea. Why aren't you attacking? Shock and fear appeared on Yunlai's face. Su Ming's strength had far surpassed his expectations, and he was even more shocked by Su Ming's various divine abilities. When he saw the shards of the red blade charging towards him, he immediately let out a roar as he charged forward. Almost the instant he let out that roar, a sigh reverberated in the world. Right before everyone's eyes, Zhongzhe took a step out from the air beside the retreating Yunlai. The instant he walked out, he looked at Su Ming with a complicated expression. Behind him, Yunlai charged forward. He was roaring madly in his heart as he charged back to his cave abode. He still had one more killing move, but he could only execute it with the help of the sacrificial item in his cave abode. In the midst of his complicated emotions, Zhongzhe lifted his right hand, formed a seal, and pushed forward in the face of the incoming windstorm of shards. With it, his body instantly crashed into the windstorm of shard from the long blade, and booming sounds reverberated in the air. Another person appeared behind Zhongzhe. That person was slightly old, and it was Zhongzhe himself. Soon after, another person appeared. That person was also Zhongzhe, but he was even older. There were a total of 8 of these figures, each older than the last. They formed a row, and once they fought against each other, they eventually fused together to form Zhongzhe's body once again. Zhongzhe spread his arms wide, and the presence that belonged to an shaman instantly turned into a screen of light that isolated Su Ming from the rapidly retreating Yunlai. Fellow Berserker Yunlai, if you die, Southern Swamp Island will go through a drastic change. There are thousands of shamans and berserkers on this island, I hope. Before Zhongzhe could finish speaking, his pupil shrank, and he instantly took a few steps back. The presence of an shaman rose once again. At the same time, he formed a seal with his hands and tapped a few spots on his body. A dark light shone in his eyes. The reason why he did this was because purple light had appeared around Su Ming, who was walking towards him. That purple light was like flowing water, and once it covered Su Ming's entire body, it turned into a purple armor. At the same time, as Su Ming lifted his right hand, that purple light spread out, and a long purple spear that was several dozens of feet long appeared before Zhongzai's eyes in a manner that shocked his mind. The feeling of power, madness, and bloodlust tore through Zhongzai's heart, causing a dazed look to appear in his eyes for an instant, as if his mind had been dragged into a vortex in hell. The instant clarity returned to his eyes. He would never forget the purple light that filled the sky. He saw Su Ming lifting his hand and throwing the long spear forward. That long spear let out a hum and broke through the screen of light that Zhongzai did not know about. That screen of light did not even have the slightest bit of resistance. The instant it exploded, the long spear turned into a purple shadow that surged into the sky and charged towards Yunlai in the distance. It was so quick that it looked as if it had sliced through the sky and earth, and it pierced through Yunlai's body, who had reached an extreme state of shock and terror. As he let out a shrill scream of pain, Yunlai's body exploded. The long spear let out a bang and pierced into an empty mountain in the distance. That mountain trembled and was reduced to ashes. Su Ming stood in midair. The purple light around his body quickly dissipated, and the purple armor turned into thin threads that crawled into Su Ming's body. The long spear that he had thrown into the distance also turned into a ray of purple light and returned to Su Ming's hand. His body returned to its original state in an instant, and he wrapped his fist in his palm towards Zhongzai. It was a slip of the hand. Please forgive me. I've only written 2 chapters since noon. I feel as if my mind is on the verge of collapsing. It's a mess, and I can't even organize my words properly. My condition today is too bad, and I can't explode. I'm not satisfied with the 2 chapters one wrote today, either. If I force myself to continue writing, then I'll be being irresponsible to the readers who paid for it. If my condition returns tomorrow, I'll explode. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 577. I really can't write anything today. I feel like I've been squeezed dry. I see that the monthly votes have returned to first place. I'm very excited, but I'm excited, but my mind is still muddled. I really want to write, but I can't. It feels like my soul has left my body. I'm in a very bad state. I'm sorry for the votes and expectations of my fellow cultivators. I'm sorry. I'll definitely explode tomorrow. Please give me some time to rest my mind. Please continue to give me monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 578. Zhongzai sighed in his heart, and his gaze as he looked at Su Ming became even more complicated. When they first met, this person had still been weak, but he had already caught some of his attention. When they met again, that astonishing power and the power to seal the world with just a wave of his hand had shocked Zhongzai, but he could vaguely tell that Su Ming was not Su Ming when he was in that state. Then came this moment. He saw Su Ming once again, but this time, the shock Su Ming brought him surpassed the previous 2 times. This did not mean that Su Ming's level of cultivation had surpassed Hong Luo's, but at that moment, in Zhongzai's eyes, Su Ming was himself. They had met 3 times, and each time was different. Among all the people Zhongzai had met in his life, only this Su Ming could give him such a strong feeling. Your failure this time will cause Southern Swamp Island to no longer have peace. The people who have struggled to survive the calamity on this island will once again face the danger of death and face the hunt from eastern wastelands. Zhongzai did not look at Yunlai's torn flesh, but instead sighed. Su Ming remained silent. He did not speak. Almost the instant he killed Yunlai, he could already feel the ground of Southern Swamp Island trembling slightly. The tremors were not strong in the beginning, but soon they turned into booming sounds. The man-made sky started flashing continuously, alternating between light and darkness. When Su Ming lifted his head to look, the man-made night shone brilliantly and instantly illuminated southern Swamp Island, but that light was like a bolt of lightning that sliced through the sky before it quickly disappeared. A series of banging sounds came from the sky. As the light dissipated, the stars in the artificial sky seemed to be connected to each other. They gradually dimmed, and in the end, they became black again. However, the black now was fundamentally different from the previous darkness. The darkness just now was due to the man-made sky losing all the spiritual aura that had been activated. Yet now, due to the change that had happened to southern Swamp Island, the man-made sky had shattered. Even though there was still protection around, that protection was transparent, and the darkness that fell on Su Ming was the color of the Dead Sea outside. As Su Ming saw the darkness of the Dead Sea, Zhongzhe saw it, Feng Tsanglan saw it, and all the shamans and berserkers living on southern Swamp Island saw it clearly. Some of the people who survived the calamity did so because they were lucky, but most of them had different experiences. These experiences varied, but there was one shocking similarity between them, and that was determination. If they did not have determination, it would have been difficult for them to struggle in this chaotic world. If they did not have determination, it would have been even more difficult for them to open their eyes after countless people died in the land of South Mourning. That was why, even though a change had happened in southern Swamp Island, and even though there were quite a number of people who saw Yun Lai's death and Su Ming's appearance, there was only shock on their faces. There was not much panic, and neither was there a single buzz or uproar. Instead, they looked at the sky quietly and sensed the ground trembling under their feet as southern Swamp Island slowly rose to the surface of the sea. Ziyin watched all of this with a dumbfounded expression in the crowd. She had expected this to happen, but she did not expect the result to be like this. She might have been Yun Lai's concubine in the past and believed that she understood him a lot, but she still did not know that southern Swamp Island's rune was connected to Yun Lai's life force. Feng Tsanglan fell silent. She knew that Yun Lai's life force was connected to the rune. This was also one of the many preparations she had made, and she was confident that she could kill or injure Yun Lai gravely. She also knew that southern Swamp Island's rune would shatter if Yun Lai died, and the island would resurface from the depths of the sea. Yet determination appeared in her eyes. Yin has been humiliated for me for many years. She might be together with Yamu now, but she doesn't know that Yun Lai has placed a seal on her. She might seem to be free to live or die, but in truth, she is still in Yun Lai's hands. Zhongzhe won't interfere too much in this matter either, unless Yamu becomes a ladder shaman. This is what I saw in Yun Lai's memories. Yin could be humiliated for me, and I can also bear the infamy of being cold-blooded for her. Even if I have to use the entire southern Swamp Island as the price, as long as I can let Yin obtain true freedom, then everything will be worth it. This was what Feng Tsanglan had said to herself in the past, after she made up her plan to kill Yun Lai. There was a second part to her plan. Once she killed or injured Yun Lai heavily, she would make detailed preparations and leave safely with Ziyin. They would head to other islands and start a new life. However, Su Ming's appearance messed up all of this. Su Ming could feel the island trembling even more violently under his feet. Once he noticed the rise of southern Swamp Island, in silence, he looked towards the depths of the Dead Sea. The seawater looked as if it had been split open, and a gigantic pit had also appeared on the surface of the sea. Waves were tumbling towards the edges of the pit. In just a moment, a loud bang that shook the sky and earth reverberated in the originally empty sea, and an island rose from the bottom of the sea. At the instant it appeared, a large amount of seawater tumbled and roared, and an arc-shaped screen of light enveloped the island. As the island appeared on the surface of the sea, the light from the world outside instantly seeped through the screen of light and landed on the island. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the clouds in the sky beyond the screen of light. He looked at the roars coming from the surface of the sea around him, and Zhongzhe's voice reached his ears. The crash for the eastern wastelands caused the land of South Mourning to be torn to pieces. It turned into 3 much smaller continents, and then there are the numerous islands at the edges. The three much smaller continents have runes protecting them, and it's as if they've been sealed off, forbidding all outsiders from stepping foot into them. Besides the three much smaller continents, there are also the numerous islands. Most of these islands do not have any living creatures on them. Only a few of them are the residences of those who survived the calamity, just like us. Compared to the three sealed continents, we, who live on the islands, have to face even more dangers. These dangers come from the Dead Sea, but most of them come from eastern wastelands. The catastrophe of the eastern wastelands also struck once the land of South Morning was destroyed. The continent also crumbled, and a large amount of islands appeared. However, since eastern wastelands had a population several times that of South Morning's, their overall damage was far less than that of South Morning's. The land did not shatter into pieces. South Morning has suffered too many casualties, but eastern wastelands did not suffer too much damage. This has created a huge difference in strength. The people from eastern wastelands take pleasure in hunting down those of us from South Morning. To them, it doesn't matter whether we are shamans or berserkers. We are all lowly beings. Scour Sieve Festival is a bloody festival organized by the largest island in the islands beyond the eastern wastelands, Scour Sieve Island, to hunt down the people of South Morning. This Scour Sieve Festival is held once every 2 years, and now it's almost here. If Southern Swamp Island is revealed on the surface of the sea right now, it will definitely attract the attention of the cultivators from eastern wastelands. Su Ming, you really shouldn't have killed Yunlai. Zhongzhe looked at the sky beyond the screen of light, then at the sea around him. There was an ancient tone to his words. Senior Zhongzhe, do you have a map of the outer islands of eastern wastelands regarding Scour Sieve? Su Ming averted his gaze from the sky and turned his head back to look at Zhongzhe before he asked calmly. A brilliant glint appeared in Zhongzhe's eyes. As he looked at Su Ming, a grave look appeared on his face. Do you know that Scour Sieve Island is the largest island outside eastern wastelands? The old Scour Sieve Island is a berserker at the peak of the later stage of the berserker soul realm, and he's already half a step away from attaining great completion. I once fought against him and lost. This person's divine abilities are unfathomable, and he also has the power of Great U Sky Palace. Based on what you berserkers say, he's someone who went to Great U Dynasty before. Once this sort of person attains great completion in the berserker soul realm, he will be equivalent to an end shaman who stands at the peak of the shaman tribe. He's a person who has the right to be compared to us empty shamans. Your power is indeed extraordinary, but do you have the confidence to fight against him? Zhongzhe asked in a low voice. Su Ming did not answer Zhongzhe's question. Instead, he asked flatly, I remember hearing someone say that among the 3 realms of the shaman tribe's cultivation system, the end shamans are equivalent to berserkers who have attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. Is that true? Theoretically, yes, but in truth, the berserker tribe's cultivation system has a long history. Once it was created by the first berserker soul realm, it became the main cultivation system of the berserker tribe, and the shaman tribe's cultivation system was created by the Lord of Nine Li when he gave up on his identity as a berserker. Due to the strangeness of the shaman tribe's arts and divine abilities, all those below the end shaman tribe are stronger than those in the berserker tribe. But if we fight against a berserker who has attained great completion in the berserker soul realm, then an end shaman will not be a berserker who has attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. If I truly compare them, then based on my experiences, I can fight against those in the later stage of the berserker soul realm, but I won't be able to win against those who have attained great completion. In fact, this old Scour Sieve Island is only half a step away from attaining great completion, but since he has great U's power in his hands, that's why I'm still not his opponent. Unless an empty shaman like the great patriarch appears in the shaman tribe. Su Ming nodded and did not speak. From what I know, besides old Scour Sieve Island, there's also an end shaman Bao Shan who betrayed the shaman tribe and surrendered to us. There are also 3 berserkers in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm who are as powerful as Yunlai. There are also quite a number of ladder shamans in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm who are under Bao Shan's command. This sort of power is not something we can fight against. That's why most of the other islands in this area, including Southern Swamp Island, focus on hiding, Zhongzhe said in a low voice. Senior Zhongzhe, how much time do you have left? Suming suddenly asked. Zhongzhe fell silent. After a long while, he closed his eyes, and the aura of death hidden around his body became clearer. Less than 10 years. I, Suming, am a berserker, and I've lived among the shamans for many years. Now that the calamity of South Mourning is over, the shaman and berserker tribes have fused together. Suming's gaze fell on Zhongzhe before he slowly moved it away to look at Fong Songlan, who had a complicated expression on her face, as well as the shamans and berserkers who had walked out of their cave abodes on the island. I've never done anything for the berserker tribe. Then let me do one thing for you. Suming looked at the people in ragged clothes. He looked at them surviving under the calamity, but they had to hide themselves, and all of this was because of Eastern Wastelands. My condition has recovered slightly, and I'm now asking for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 579. Once Southern Swamp Island appeared on the surface of the seawater tumbled outwards. On the island, the shamans and berserkers on Southern Swamp Island looked at Suming and Zhongzhe in the sky in silence under the screen of light. Zhongzhe lifted his right hand, and a jade slip immediately appeared on his palm. He flung it towards Suming, and the jade slip turned into a long arc that instantly appeared before Suming. Once Suming caught it, he focused his attention on it. There was a simple map inside, and on the map were 3 smaller continents in the direction of South Mourning. They were separated by the Dead Sea, and while they were called continents, they could be seen as larger islands. There were numerous small islands near Eastern Wastelands. As for Eastern Wastelands, there were also quite a number of islands at the edge of a gigantic continent. One of them was an island that was several times bigger than Southern Swamp Island, and there were 2 words written on it, Scour Sieve. I, Zhongzhe, have left my homeland in the south, and I cannot go with you. I can only bow to you for this. Zhongzhe looked at Suming, and the complicated look in his eyes gradually turned into a sentimental one. He wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards Suming. Suming averted his gaze from the jade slip and looked at Zhongzhe as he asked out of thin air, Senior Zhongzhe, please tell me whether my eldest senior brother came to the land of the shamans in the past. The young master came to Autumn's Sea Tribe during the calamity, but he did not go to the god of Shaman's temple. Instead, when the calamity happened, he went to Eastern Wastelands. Zhongzhe said in a low voice. Suming frowned. After a moment of silence, Zhongzhe said, according to what I know, the reason why young master wants to go to the Eastern Wasteland is because his master went there many years ago and never came back. It seems that something happened to him. He knew the relationship between the young master of Ninely tribe and Suming. He could not hide this from him. Suming lifted his head swiftly and looked at Zhongzhe. Senior Zhongzhe, please tell me in detail. I didn't understand the details because of the conflict between the shamans and berserkers at that time, but based on what I know, Senior Tian Xiezi crossed the Dead Sea alone and went to Eastern Wastelands as if he wanted to try and stop the calamity, but he never came back. But the calamity did arrive much later. I remember that before you went to Eastern Wastelands in the past, you stood on the mountain one night with a broken wooden plate in your hands, and your face was filled with grief. Zhongzhe looked at Suming and spoke softly. A shudder ran through Suming's body, and a bang instantly rang out in his head. He could tell that Zhongzhe was not lying, and there was no need for him to lie about this either. A scene seemed to appear before his eyes. In that image, the sea was surging and a mountain peak was in the clouds. Eldest senior brother stood there silently, looking at the roaring Dead Sea from afar. He looked at the huge eastern wasteland that was crashing toward them. His expression was filled with sorrow. In his hand was a wooden tablet, and on that wooden tablet were written 3 words, Tian Xiezi. There were cracks on the wooden tablet, as if it could shatter at any time. As the sea roared and the eastern wasteland smashed into it, eldest senior brother's lonely figure stepped into the void with sorrow and charged toward the eastern wasteland. Master, eldest senior brother. Su Ming turned his head around and looked in the direction of eastern wastelands. A crazed killing intent appeared in his eyes. He did not want to think too much about it. He was afraid that the more he thought about it, the more answers he would obtain and the more he would lose. He suddenly understood what Zi Yin had said before. His second senior brother had left the ninth summit and never returned. He had been slightly puzzled when he heard this before. His second senior brother loved the ninth summit, and the ninth summit was his home. If the sky had not fallen, he would definitely not leave the ninth summit. Yet he still left, and he never came back. Su Ming had originally been wondering where he had gone, but now he was absolutely certain that his second senior brother had gone to Eastern Wastelands. He had gone to search for his master. Eldest senior brother had gone after him, and he had also gone to search for his master, or perhaps he was still searching for his second junior brother. What about Huzi? Is he still in the ninth summit? Su Ming mumbled. He suddenly had an urge to return to the ninth summit and see whether Huzi was still around. Then he would go to Eastern Wastelands and search for his eldest senior brother and second senior brother's tracks. Search for them. Search for his master. Zhongzhe looked at Su Ming. This young man had given him different feelings each time he met him 3 times, and he remembered the young lord of Ninely tribe. He remembered the person who had forgotten about Eastern Wastelands. He also remembered how his Autumn Sea tribe had fallen apart and most of his tribe members were scattered. He remembered the little amount of life he had left, and he remembered the awe-inspiring manner he had when he was young. Gradually, with melancholy, Zhongzhe turned around and left. The sky gradually darkened. The sound of waves crashing on the surface of the sea traveled into Su Ming's ears. He sat on a mountain in the mountain range and looked at the darkness in the distance without a single word. At some unknown point in time, Fong Songlan walked out of the darkness behind him and stood beside him. She looked at him gently, but did not speak. Instead, she sat down beside him. The sea splashed, and the world was dark. They did not speak, neither did they meet each other's gazes. Fong Songlan stayed by Su Ming's side quietly and spent the entire night on the mountain. When the skies started turning gray and light seeped through the layers of clouds, Su Ming, who had been sitting there for the entire night and thinking about many things, closed his eyes. The scenes of the ninth summit kept appearing in his mind. "Thank you," Su Ming said softly. Fong Songlan did not speak. She looked at the sky in the distance, which might have been dark, but it was much brighter than night, and shook her head. "If you don't want to stay in Southern Swamp Island, you can go to the Fated Kins Island with Zi Yin. She knows where it is." Su Ming opened his eyes and looked at the woman who had been sitting beside him for the entire night. He looked at the side of her face. Her face was incredibly beautiful. "You don't have to worry about me. My level of cultivation might not be high, but the preparations I've made over the years are very detailed. I won't run into any dangers I can't resolve. As for you, scour Civ Island." Fong Songlan turned her head around and looked at Su Ming with her beautiful eyes, not averting her gaze. "I know that Yunlai is refining an enchanted treasure. He needs my divine ability to fully activate it. The origins of that enchanted treasure are unknown. If you go and get it." Fong Songlan immediately spoke, and Su Ming saw the concern and worry on her face. "There's no need. Since he needs your divine ability to fully activate it, then you should be able to use it." But Fong Songlan panicked. Just as she was about to continue speaking, a smile appeared on Su Ming's face. That smile was very faint, but contained within it was confidence. "The memories you saw from the past 20 years are just fragments, not all of them." Su Ming looked at Fong Songlan and smiled. Fong Songlan was momentarily stunned, but she soon remembered that even with Yunlai's strength, he still had no way of fighting back before Su Ming. This sort of strength had already surpassed Fong Songlan's understanding. Fong Songlan remained silent for a moment before she asked softly, What is your level of cultivation now?" "Bone sacrifice." Su Ming looked at Fong Songlan. "That's impossible." Fong Songlan's eyes went wide, and a dark light shone in them. As she lifted her right hand, the jade bone appeared on her palm. Once she pressed her palm on it, she lifted her left hand to hold Su Ming's hand and closed her eyes. Su Ming did not refuse. After a moment, Fong Songlan shuddered and her eyes flew open. The candle dragon's blessing. Bone sacrifice of your entire body. She mumbled, and as she looked at Su Ming, disbelief appeared in her eyes. Su Ming did not speak. He only nodded. Fong Songlan only recovered after a long while. She looked at Su Ming, and her eyes became even brighter, but there was a hint of hesitation in them. She bit her bottom lip, and after a moment, a grave look appeared on her face, and she spoke softly. Su Ming, do you remember the first time we met? At that time, after you left my big brother's place, I saw your memories. Su Ming's expression was calm. There was no way he could forget this. That was the first time he doubted himself, and all of it was because of the pity on Fong Songlan's face and the words she said that he could not understand at that time. Destiny, huh? Su Ming asked faintly. You know about it? The pity she had in the past gradually appeared in Fong Songlan's eyes once again, and she asked softly, I saw you spending 50 years in a void. I also saw you being chained up, and I saw you dying. Fong Songlan finally told Su Ming the secret she had kept in her heart for 20-something years. I saw them calling you Destiny. I saw you dying more than hundreds of times. I also saw a place called Dark Mountain, but when I wanted to continue looking at it, I was forcefully broken by a power from the world outside. That power was too strong. I couldn't fight against it at all. I could feel that this power originally wanted to destroy me because I saw something I shouldn't have seen. But for some unknown reason, the moment that power was about to wipe me off, it disappeared. Fong Songlan mumbled. She held Su Ming's hand and closed her eyes once again. At the instant she did so, a bang went off in Su Ming's head, and moving pictures appeared in his head. Those pictures showed everything that Fong Songlan had seen in the past. Over the past 20 years, my level of cultivation has been increasing very quickly. And the main reason for this is because of the power that wanted to destroy me when I saw your memories in the past. Gradually, I noticed that it didn't disappear but stayed in my body. I want to help you. I want you to know just what you've lost. I want you to know just how many of your true memories have been changed and sealed away. That's why I'm working hard in my training and fusing with that power. I want to push this unique divine ability of mine to its pinnacle. I believe that one day, I will definitely be able to help you. If you believe me, then let me try to take another look at your past memories. Fong Songlan's mumbles echoed in Su Ming's ears. In silence, Su Ming gradually spread out his mind, and under Fong Songlan's guidance, he returned to the passage of time. The hole appeared in front of his eyes, and he saw himself chained up. He saw the figure sitting cross-legged on the gigantic head, and there was that sentence, "You disappoint me." After an unknown amount of time, Su Ming's eyes flew open. Fong Songlan shuddered before him, and a mouthful of blood flowed out of the corners of her mouth. Su Ming dragged her behind him with his left hand, then lifted his right hand and hurled a punch at the spot where Fong Songlan had been sitting previously. That punch instantly caused the air to distort, and a cold harumph that seemed to have come from the distance traveled forth swiftly. The second update is here. It's not too far away from the first update. Please get a monthly vote. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 580. At the instant Su Ming hurled his fist forward, the cold harumph also came from the air. A violent bang rang in the air, and Su Ming shuddered. Cracking sounds that sounded as if he was about to shatter came from his body. He grabbed Fong Songlan and tumbled backwards without any hesitation. In an instant, he disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already several thousands of feet away. Fong Songlan's face was pale, but there was determination on her face. When Su Ming pulled her back, she lifted her hand without panicking and pointed forward. With it, the protective screen of light around southern Swamp Dao sect immediately shone with a powerful light. Streams of light spilled out and gathered together at the edge of the screen to turn into a powerful ray of light that charged towards the indistinct, illusory figure before Su Ming. They instantly crashed into each other, and as booming sounds reverberated in the air, Su Ming let go of Fong Tsonglan's hand with a grave expression on his face. The power of the Bone Sacrifice realm erupted from his entire body, and he took a step towards the incoming illusory figure. Almost the instant he took that step, Fong Tsonglan immediately sat down cross-legged by the side. She did not care about the dangers in this place. Neither was she worried that Su Ming would be distracted. Instead, she closed her eyes, and after casting some unknown divine ability, she suddenly spoke. 32 feet to the left, 79 feet to the right, and 2,084 feet to the front, the dimensional boundary point. The instant Fong Tsonglan said those words, the eyes of the translucent figure charging towards Su Ming shone, and it looked straight towards Fong Tsonglan. Su Ming closed in on her in an instant, and as golden light shone around his body, he pressed his finger against the air 32 feet to the left of Fong Tsonglan. Instantly, cracking sounds reverberated in the air, and the translucent figure froze. At the instant it froze, Su Ming turned his right hand into a palm and pushed it towards his right. A huge force surged into the 79 feet to his right. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the cracking sounds rose up once again. The translucent figure let out a low growl and lifted its arm, as if it was forming a seal. It did not attack Su Ming, but instead pushed towards Fong Tsonglan through the air. It was also at that moment that Su Ming clenched his left fist and rammed it against the third spot on the dimensional world boundary. It was 2,084 feet in front of him. At the instant his fist landed, the area around the semi-transparent figure distorted, as if space itself had collapsed. A great suction force seemed to be tumbling backwards, causing the figure to be sucked into it and disappear without a trace. However, even though he had disappeared, the killing intent from the palm strike he had sent toward Fong Xianjilan was still there, and it seemed that it was about to touch Fong Xianjilan. With Fong Tsonglan's level of cultivation, it was impossible for her to dodge. She lifted her head and looked at Su Ming. There was a reluctance to part in her eyes, but she was smiling. When he saw that he could not change anything, a focused look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his left hand and pointed towards the sky, then pushed his right hand towards the ground. Past, future, as Su Ming mumbled softly, overlapping and intersecting with each other appeared on his body. The time around him looked as if it was flowing backwards. The entire world seemed to have frozen for an instant, and the palm seal pressing down on Fong Xianjilan also froze for an instant. It even started showing signs of moving backwards. Without any hesitation, Su Ming took a step forward and warped to appear before Fong Xianjilan. When he lifted his right hand, the time around him instantly returned to normal. Everything in the area started circulating at a speed that was several times faster than before, as if it wanted to catch up to time. The palm seal crashed into Su Ming's right hand. With a loud bang that shook the sky, the palm seal crumbled. Blood trickled out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth, but he continued standing there without moving, because behind him was Fong Xianjilan, the woman who had fallen into a life and death crisis because of him. Fong Xianjilan stared at the back of the person before her in a daze, and the gentleness in her eyes grew stronger. The palm seal disappeared, and everything in the air returned to normal. Strangely, the powerful ripples of power and the booming sounds that surged into the sky did not attract any attention from the other people in southern Swamp Island. It was as if they did not hear or feel anything. It's this power, but it's a little more agile compared to last time, Fong Xianjilan said softly. She stood up and went before Su Ming to wipe off the blood at the corners of his mouth. Yet at the instant her hand touched Su Ming's blood, both Su Ming and Fong Xianjilan were stunned. The blood started rapidly decaying on Fong Xianjilan's finger. In the blink of an eye, it turned black before turning into an aura of death that dissipated away. Fong Xianji Lan's eyes went wide. She did not know what had happened, but when she lifted her head to look at Su Ming, she saw a hint of grief in his eyes. Her heart trembled. Just as she was about to ask something, Su Ming closed his eyes. Su Ming was not unfamiliar with that semi-transparent figure. He could sense a hint of Di Tian's presence on it. However, that presence was incredibly faint, and it was as if it had blocked off an endless amount of space from coming towards him. Fong Xianjilan had executed her divine ability just now to help Su Ming see through his memories at a deeper level. But in the end, she had still failed, and she had even attracted Di Tian's presence. If it was not because Su Ming was no longer the same as he was in the past, then Fong Xianjilan would have definitely died. Dimensional world junctions. The three spots that connected the space in this place just now and allowed that semi-transparent figure to come here. Are they called dimensional world junctions? Su Ming opened his eyes and looked towards Fong Xianjilan. How did you know? He asked calmly. I don't know what's going on either. The instant I sensed that presence coming towards me, I saw these three spots around him, and he seemed to have used them to come here. The distance between him and those three spots will never change, Fong Xianjilan said softly. Confusion appeared in Fong Tsonglan's eyes as she spoke softly. She was still immersed in the scene of Su Ming's blood turning black and turning into the aura of death on her finger. Su Ming's expression became even more complicated. The scene of his blood turning into the aura of death and the three-dimensional world junctions Fong Xianjilan had mentioned kept appearing in his head. After a long while, Fong Xianjilan looked at Su Ming and bit her bottom lip. Why did your blood turn like this when it was in my hands? I'm tired, Songlan. Su Ming fell silent and sat down cross-legged on the ground, then slowly closed his eyes. Fong Xianjilan stood by his side quietly for some time. In her anguish, she had a feeling that the Su Ming before her was different from how he was in the past. At that moment, his emotions kept changing, and he was sometimes cold, sometimes warm. All of this must be related to his blood turning into the aura of death in my hands. I will definitely know the reason behind this. Determination appeared in Fong Xianjilan's eyes. She cast Su Ming a glance, then turned around and left. Once she left, she could not hear Su Ming mumbling those words. Thank you, Songlan. Based on Su Ming's plans, he was prepared to have Fong Xianjilan use her unique ability to look through the memories of Di Tian's servant he had captured, but the scene just then had made him temporarily give up on that thought. It was very easy for accidents to happen. If he lured the semi-transparent figure with a hint of Di Tian's presence over, then Su Ming knew that with his current level of cultivation, it would be difficult for him to protect Fong Xianjilan once that person was prepared for it. He sat there quietly and watched the sky gradually turn from light to darkness, then watched the darkness slowly fade away to reveal the arrival of a new day. During the past few days, the people on the island had been continuously strengthening the runes under Zhongzhe's arrangements in an attempt to make the island sink to the bottom of the sea once again. It was not impossible, but they needed some time. Su Ming was not worried about Fong Xianjilan. She had changed greatly, and the feeling she gave Su Ming was different from the one in the past. It did not matter whether it was her intelligence or her resolution. All of them were enough for her to protect herself with her strange divine abilities, even if her level of cultivation was not high. After all, this was a woman who dared to kill a berserker in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm when she was only in the bone sacrifice realm. Su Ming would not underestimate this sort of person. Besides, you're different. You're the first time I've seen someone like you. Just how many of these continents in the land of berserkers are there? Su Ming mumbled. At the instant his blood turned into the aura of death on Fong Xianjilan's hand, Su Ming remembered how he had flown out of the vortex with the ancient bronze sword from true Sacredine World. At the instant he saw the galaxy, he remembered how his entire body had been drowned in a thick aura of death. That feeling was similar to how it looked on Fong Xianjilan's finger when it shrank several times and turned into a drop of blood. 32 feet, 79 feet, 248 feet. Su Ming looked at the interface between the sky and the sea in the distance and mumbled. His expression became even more complicated, and nostalgia appeared in his eyes as he thought about the three so-called dimensional coordinates. When Fong Xianjilan mentioned the three coordinates, Su Ming did not think too much about it. But once his blood turned into the aura of death, he was shocked, and the three numbers continued appearing in his head. He had a vague feeling that the three coordinates were very, very familiar. That familiarity was a feeling that was carved into his soul, that was etched deep into his bones, and that he would never be able to forget. If there's a fourth dimensional coordinate, then is it 3,771 feet? If there's a fifth, is it 5,663 feet? If there's a sixth dimensional coordinate, then is it 7,800 feet? Su Ming mumbled softly to himself in anguish. There was no way he could forget those six numbers. There was no way he would not be familiar with them. 32, 79, 248, 371, 563, 781. Elder, just what are you trying to tell me? You told me these six numbers when we were at the steps leading to the sacred mountain in Windstream Tribe. They're numbers I've always remembered. I originally thought they were just places for people to rest, but only now do I know that they aren't. Su Ming closed his eyes, and tears fell down his cheeks. Elder, are you really the elder of Dark Mountain Tribe? Are you really the elder who raised me since I was young? Are you really the elder who taught me how to be a person? Are you really the elder who taught me how to be cautious, how to think, and how to kill? Elder, who are you? More tears streamed down Su Ming's cheeks. Elder, is Dark Mountain real? Bei Ling, Lei Chun, Wu La Bai Ling. Are all of them real? Su Ming opened his eyes and looked at the sky and sea. He continued looking at it until his tears dried up, until a thick wave of sadness appeared on his body, until he stood up and did not see the girl who had been watching him for the past few days on the mountain in the distance. Then he took a step toward the sky. Monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.